Calling this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. This hearing is being recorded. It's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Today's hearing is on Docket 0146, Order for a Hearing regarding the coordination of construction and utility permits. It was sponsored by Councilor Flynn and Councilor Coletta. And we're joined here today by the co-sponsors, Council President Ed Flynn of District 2, Councilor Gigi Coletta of District 1, and then also by my at-large colleague, Councilor Aaron Murphy at-large. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.csit@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. We will take public testimony at the end of the hearing, so if you want to sign up for that in person, you can do so on the sheet near the door. And if you're looking to testify virtually, please email Megan Kavanaugh at megan.kavanaugh@boston.gov. That's megan.kavanaugh@boston.gov. Megan, you can't move the cursor right there when I'm doing that. megan.kavanaugh@boston.gov for the link. And Megan will send that to you and your name will be added to the list. We always ask folks to just kind of try to keep public testimony relatively brief so that we can get everybody in. And I will go to my colleagues for some brief opening statements in order of arrival, starting with Councilor Coletta, Councilor Flynn, and then Councilor Murphy. And then I'll introduce the administration panel. We're grateful to have a number of our administration and agency partners with us here today. So without further ado, Councilor Coletta.
Thank you so much, Chair Bach. My understanding is that this is the last time you will be chairing a hearing here in the Boston City Council, so it's a bittersweet time for us, and I feel very lucky that this is a docket that I've sponsored. And thank you always for your partnership in this work, and just so appreciate you. I want to thank you all so much for joining us in this conversation today. I want to thank co-sponsor Council President Ed Flynn in helping me to present this order regarding issuance and coordination of construction and utility permits in the City of Boston. I also want to thank my councilor colleague at large, Aaron Murphy, for being here as well. I brought this forward just to table set and to provide a framework for this conversation. The city is growing exponentially, and for its densest neighborhoods, like my hometown of East Boston, the North End, and South Boston, there's a lot of activity when it comes to road work, street excavation, and development projects that require digging and the temporary loss of parking on our city streets. What I'm seeing in East Boston, what I have seen over the last 3 years, is somehow all of the road work happening at any given time takes place at the same time within 2 or 3 block radiuses. And I asked, why is this happening? Why is there no sort of coordination? Particularly in Eagle Hill in 2019, there was a large project done by a quasi-governmental agency who was here, that they were digging up 100-year pipes while there were other utility companies around the block replacing their infrastructure, while other numerous development projects shut down sidewalks and streets, while the city was also repaving streets. And this all happened at the same time, again, within a 3 to 4 block radius. This is still happening to this day, and we will hear from folks from the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association, Gove Street Neighborhood Association, who will be a part of the public testimony component. The problem is not the work, right? These things will happen. Our city continues to grow and get enhanced through various projects. Digging up streets is necessary to improve our infrastructure. The problem is the lack of coordination, and then sometimes the notice to residents about what is happening right outside their front door. The lack of consideration of the number of projects and how it will impact residents' quality of life is really affecting their ability to traverse the streets without conflicting detours as well. I've already had an incredibly informative walk with the Public Works Department, and I want to thank John, who just walked out. We had an awesome walk last summer where I learned a lot. And so I've also had conversations with some utility companies, and thank you all so much for being here again. So my goal with all of this is just to get information, right? This is an information gathering session. Fully understand the internal machinations of the interdepartmental approvals in the City of Boston for street occupancy and excavation permits, who reviews and approves what, and how the current system, my understanding is that it's the COBUX system, how it is working and whatever opportunities there might be to modernize it, to make it better for the sort of coordination that I'm discussing. Another component to this conversation that I wanted to get into is just how to develop standards to which we are leaving our streets. Right now, if you walk the streets of East Boston, there are machines everywhere, things that you use to dig up the streets. It's a mess. And so I really wanted to dive into that and to dig deep into that. No pun intended. I tried to avoid it, but I said it anyway. And then adequate community notice, what you all are doing, especially the utility companies, what you're doing to just inform residents that this is taking place. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Coletta. And I want to note we've also been joined by our at-large colleague, Councillor Julia Mejia. I'm going next to another co-sponsor, President Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to you, Madam Chair, for chairing this important discussion, and to our colleague, Councillor Coletta, for co-sponsoring this hearing order. We often hear from residents about negative impact on their quality of life when there are multiple construction projects being worked on in their neighborhood. Oftentimes, you would see a construction truck and utility truck occupying a residential block at the same time, taking over parking spots and blocking traffic. We do need the ongoing maintenance and construction taking place. It improves our city, it improves the quality of life for our residents. However, oftentimes there is a lack of adequate notice to residents, and neighbors would not know that there would be multiple construction projects going on at the same time. When residents would return back to the streets, they would have a challenging time finding a parking spot as well, circling the block frequently. So I think it would be productive for us to coordinate in issuing construction and utility permits so that we can maximize the possibility of having multiple projects going on at the same time on the same street. And I also want to thank the city administration for being here, but more importantly for the important work you do in helping build a stronger city for all of us. I also want to acknowledge the companies that are here and their representatives for the important work they do in working closely with city officials on these construction projects. You're professional, you work hard, and you're improving the quality of life for city residents. I also know that Councilor Coletta is working on or creating a system in Boston so that we can better coordinate the timing of this ongoing work, construction work, and to better inform residents about the projects on their street. So I want to say thank you to Councilor Coletta for thinking and addressing that. That's really the heart of the matter, is trying to come up with a system where everybody knows exactly what might be taking place on a particular street, so city officials can coordinate with elected officials and with residents about the impact this might have on their home, on their family, or their quality of life. So again, I want to say thank you to Councilor Bach. I want to say thank you to Councilor Coletta, and also to the city team that's here that does a tremendous job working for the residents, along with the various utility companies that are in our neighborhoods frequently, but also improving the lives of Boston residents. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, President Flynn. And I want to note we've also been joined by Councillor at Large Ruth C. Louis-Jen. Going now to Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And thank you to the lead sponsors, Councilor Coletta. And I appreciate your opening remarks talking about bringing people together and just trying to figure this out, fact-finding. And even in the title of the hearing order, like, how do we coordinate? We know that there's lots of construction going on different streets, all different times. We get a lot of calls in our office as an at-large council from all neighborhoods. And, the work has to happen. We can't stop work because, there's, disruption, but it's good to know ahead, and how can we just make it work better for not just the residents, but also, the construction workers and the details and all the other departments that step up and are part of the process when we have construction in the city. So looking forward to this conversation. And I do also want to shout out Council President Flynn. You're always a champion when it comes to traffic and transportation and pedestrian safety. And just looking forward to hearing how we can support here on the council. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the sponsors for bringing us together. And I want to just uplift and highlight that today is Councilor Bach's last hearing on the council. And this morning she chaired her last virtual hearing, and she's wrapping up her time with us here in the Ionella Chamber. And what better way to do this when we're talking about building and being disruptive? So I'm here for all of it. So I just want to thank everyone for being here. I wanted to just say that in the short term that I've been here in office, we, as an at-large city councilor, we get a lot of calls from people. It's like, oh my God, Eversource was just here, and now National Grid is digging up, and we need to do better in terms of coordinating and really figuring out how we can do our projects in ways that are timely. And I know that sometimes things just happen, but when we're looking at the pipes that break, or when we're looking at doing work on our streets, there just seems to be this level of lack of coordination. So I think that there's an opportunity here for us to be more thoughtful in how we build and thoughtful in how we respond to the need, so that we're not digging up a hole and then 2 weeks later digging up another hole and just like, hello, can we all just dig in some sort of uniformity, right? And then the last thing is that we also get a lot of calls from the time that we're doing the work, that sometimes people, I know we are up at 6 o'clock in the morning, but sometimes it seems like residents are calling our office and complaining about the time frame. So I know we can't stop business because we got to keep on keeping on, but if there's a way for us to talk about some sort of timing, some sort of schedule. I've heard from business owners too that when there's construction happening, there's disruption happening to their business as well. Like people are parking in spaces that they shouldn't, or taking up, occupying space. So just curious about if you could talk a little bit about that. But I'm here more so to support Councilor Bach in her last hearing, because we have been colleagues for a while, and I wanted to make sure that I showed up in support of your last one here for now, and to support Councilor Coletta for bringing this to the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. And yes, I thought Friday was my last hearing, and then we realized it was this one. So yeah, super glad to be in the chair one more time. And now I'll go to Councilor Louis-Jean.
Thank you, Councilor Chair Bach. And just want to thank you for your leadership and what you've brought to the council. We'll miss having you on this body, and we'll miss you chairing and as a colleague. And I want to thank my council colleagues for bringing this matter to the floor. I also just want to start by thanking the incredible work of our departments here in the city of Boston. I think a lot of you and the work that your departments do are, from transportation to public works to ISD, are really unsung heroes. I have seen the commitment firsthand, from small issues to like someone not having their trash picked up and me sending an email and 30 minutes later the trash being picked up, to the incredible work that our inspectors do at ISD. And so I'm excited, one, for budget season to see how we can further support the departments. Excited to be in this conversation for the reasons that my colleagues have stated. As an at-large city councilor, we get all of the calls, all of the emails from around the city. So we know when folks are upset in the North End, and when they're upset in Jamaica Plain, and when they're upset in East Boston. And so it's our charge to work alongside our colleagues, our district colleagues, to try to mitigate these issues, and that we try to do. And we know that no one here wants to cause anyone a headache or wants to create quality of life issues for any of our residents, but it's sometimes what results when there isn't the coordination that we know is possible if we put our heads together. So it's great to have folks here from Boston Water and Sewer, from BTD, from ISD, from Public Works to think about how we can do better at coordinating to decrease the number of emails we all get and the number of complaints that we all get. We got to get these small, not sometimes they're very loud actually, these big issues right so that residents can trust us with some of the even bigger issues. And so I look forward to Councilor Coletta and Councilor President Flynn's leadership on this issue as we work to coordinate permits and make sure that we have cranes in the sky, which is what, represents a developing and robust city, but that when we're doing it in a coordinated fashion that is the least disruptive possible to all of our residents. So thank you and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Councilor Louis-Jen. And I'll just add, in my capacity as the District 8 Councilor, this comes up all the time. I think everyone knows we have really old infrastructure in my part of the city, and it does require frequent repair, but when it does, it's very disruptive. And I'm just thinking of my own neighborhood of Beacon Hill. There's a large number of streets that we seem to never be able to repave because there's always a impending project or an ongoing project lately. So I think both coordinating and then this question of sort of transparency and how can we better communicate with people, because I think sometimes, and I know we're going to walk through the process, that you all actually are coordinating and you do know what's happening, but our ability, you've heard all the councilors talk about sort of the public facing aspect of our work, our ability to accurately communicate what's going on and what the time frame is and who's involved and everything isn't there. And I think that sometimes undermines our ability to communicate with the public that there actually is a plan or there is coordination happening. So definitely looking forward to discussing this in greater depth. I'm going to go down to the panel, and I should have asked in advance what order you wanted to go in. So, okay, great. Excellent. So we're thrilled today, extremely close to his first day. What day number is it? Don't press the button. That's,
second week.
Okay. So yes, in only his second week, our new Deputy Chief for Transportation, Nick Gove, is with us here in the chamber. I will let you know, Mr. Gove, that usually they let people get a few more weeks in before they have to come to the chamber. So somebody, didn't look out for you there, but we're really glad to have you and obviously thrilled to have you in this Deputy Chief role. And he's also joined, we've got Chris English, the Chief of Staff to ISD here. We've got John Vizella, Chief Engineer for Public Works here. We've got Ed Hesford, our Traffic Engineer at BTD. And then after we hear from the city departments, we'll go to Boston Water and Sewer, represented here by John Sullivan, Chief Engineer, and Irene McSweeney, the Chief of Operations. So it is definitely an all-star panel here. And we're grateful to all of you for making the time. But we'll lead off with Deputy Chief Gove.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here today. So again, my name's Nick Gove, and I joined the Streets Department last week as the Deputy Chief of Streets for Transportation. My duties also include the role of the Boston Transportation Commissioner. Before I hand over to both Ed and John, I'm just going to do a brief overview of the Streets Cabinet coordination efforts related to utility and construction permits in the city. So we use the City of Boston coordination software, COBUX, as mentioned, to track these projects and communicate to permittees which streets can be worked on and when. If the project warrants, contractors and utilities are required to meet with the BTD team to review and approve the project's construction management plan, or CMP. Once the permit and CMP are approved, the BTD permit team periodically inspects the project for compliance and amends the documents as necessary until the project is complete. In calendar year 22, the Streets Cabinet, which includes both Public Works and BTD, issued 58,500 permits to utilities, public entities, and private contractors. Of these, approximately 65% were street occupancy permits and 35% were street excavation permits. The Streets Cabinet continues to modernize and improve these processes. So for example, last year, almost a year ago in May of 22, Public Works rolled out the new portal for excavation permits. So with that brief overview, John, would you like to go next, or Ed?
Yeah, so Ed Hesford, I'm the Chief Engineer for Construction Management and Permitting within the Transportation Department. So my staff and myself review excavation requests for the traffic management plans that are submitted, that we check for public safety issues such as pedestrians, cyclists, vehicular traffic. We look at the demographics that are around the construction, meaning schools, hospitals, senior centers, et cetera. Those are all things that we look for in the review of these permits. The sheer amount of them is quite a bit, but my staff does a yeoman's job on handling those type of things. I deal with John Vazella on a daily basis on coordination issues with Public Works. Irene and John from Water and Sewer. Just as of Saturday at like midnight, we're talking on the phone about a water main break that was out at Congress and High Street. So that communication line is certainly there, and something that we've been dealing with each other for over 30 years. Same with John, and John has 50 years, but we won't go there. But there's certainly a known entity within, the city organization and the utilities, with National Grid, with Joe Carroll, with obviously Water and Sewer, also with Eversource. We have a working relation with these folks that if complaints come into the councilor's office and we're contacted, we know about it, we pick up the phone or we go right out there and we will resolve that issue. Sometimes it doesn't look like that, but there is that communication that is going on behind the scenes that certainly I think we take pride in, that over the years that we've developed that type of network and communication with the utilities, even private development. We deal with the Suffolks of the world, or John Moriarty, or any of the major builders, as well as the smaller ones. And they have to come up with construction management plans that basically, before we will permit anything, we want to see what their construction methodology is, where the public safety plans are, and it's reviewed by my staff as well as within the Public Works Department, for the permitting process. So those are the types of things that, we get into. We delve deep within these things. We take great pride in what we do. And certainly any questions that you may have, I'm obviously here to answer those. And I'll throw it over to John.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Vazella. I'm the Chief Engineer for the Public Works Department. I do manage the COBUC system that we have, and I can answer any questions that you may have on that system. I also control the construction inspection unit, which will go out and monitor work. So when a person or a company comes in for a permit, they are regulated for times and things like that through BTD. They come down to Public Works and they will pay for the permit, and we will issue that permit. I have a group of people that go out, and we go out on a daily basis and visit these jobs. We make sure that they are, to the best of our ability, following the permits that have been issued to them, as in their times that they're working, their TMP, their traffic management plans, and other things like that for safety, like pedestrian safety, bicycles, and other types of things like that. At the end of the day, or the end of the job, we go out to make sure that their workmanship was what the city expects, and we work with them. We have shut down more than one company for things that they failed to do. I work well with Eddie in that regard, and anything that is dug in the city's right-of-way, we try to monitor their work and watch out for the residents' best interests. We also will be collecting fees for any of the work that's done through Public Works permitting section, and anybody that works in the city needs to be bonded, so we monitor them to make sure that they're bonded, that their people that work there have the proper licensing, and that the companies are in good standings with things like OSHA and other departments like that. I'm here also to answer any questions you may have in those regards. Anything I can help you with, be glad to answer them.
Great, thank you so much, John. Chris?
Chris English, Chief of Staff for the Inspectional Services Department. Don't really have a formal opening statement. Our department issues permits on private property primarily. I think much of what we're discussing today is it falls out into the public realm of utilities, but we know that, our 40,000 permits that we issue every year do require a lot of work that ends up out in the public realm. We work very closely with our partners in Public Works, Transportation, on CMPs, on transportation access plans. Happy to answer questions about our process on review and how we issue permits. Really.
Great, thank you. No, we really appreciate ISD being here. It's always helpful for the council when, that way if we have a sidebar question, we don't have to do a whole new hearing just to hear the answer. Okay, and now going over to Boston Water and Sewer, John Sullivan and Irene McSweeney.
Good afternoon. My name is John Sullivan, Chief Engineer, Boston Water Sewer. Since we dig and put in 7 to 10 miles of water pipe annually and 3 to 5 miles of sewer and drain annually, I thought I'd just kind of go over the process we do for planning. In June, we send a letter to over 40 agencies asking them what capital improvements they have planned in the city of Boston. We accumulate that information, and by November of the year, we put forward our plan. We deliver the capital plan to the mayor, November 1st. We hold a hearing during November. We invite every agency within the city and state agencies to give us any input of what we plan to do. Our board votes our capital plan in December, and it begins in January. About that time, we start entering all those street names in a COBUX to let everybody know we're coming. Now, we may not be there immediately. It takes a while to do the design, but everybody knows we will be digging a street. During the design process, at 50% design, we send the same plans out to the utilities, asking for comments. We are the deepest utility in the city, but for the transit authority and the tunnels. The sewers are extremely deep. So we need to get in there first. And to get down to our pipe, sometimes the other utilities will have to move. So that's a big issue for us, other utilities, and coordination. So at the 100%, and also at that time, we will talk to transportation about limits they'll be putting on our work. Can you work at night? Can you work during the day? Can you start at 7? Can you start at 9:30? Traffic patterns, et cetera. And if we need to put a traffic management plan together. So we'll do all that. We'll go to bid. And after we go to bid, we'll have a pre-construction hearing where we invite the same cast of characters back again to say, here's our contractor, here's what we plan on doing, here's how we plan on doing it, and just get input from the various entities, both the agencies and utilities. We then inform our customers 2 weeks before we show up in any street. We mail to the owner of the property, and we own to the customers if they're just there. So if the owner lives not in the property, but some other place, we'll send notices to resident at whatever the street address is. And then we show up. And then the process starts. It's a long, arduous process. These are deep holes, deep excavations. We work with the CIU unit. We work with transportation to see how things are going. There's the issue of parking. The people complain about dust and dirt, which comes with construction. We help move rubbish barrels to the end of the street while we're blocking off streets so that the rubbish is picked up. So we believe we have an extremely coordinated effort in the long-term capital plan that we have. We've been doing that since 1980, and we don't get many complaints about our process. We get a couple complaints when we're doing the work.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. And Irene, did you want to say anything?
Yes. So the operations division at Boston Water and Sewer is a 24/7, 365 operation. We're manned all hours of the day and night. We respond to all the emergencies, failed casting. If we can't get out there in the middle of the night to fix it, it gets plated. We have a water main break. We respond. We have to turn the system off. We make the repairs. We also coordinate all of our efforts with Public Works. John will send over to us his 5-year capital program. Operations will ensure that all the sewers and the drains on those streets that he plans on fixing get televised. We also have 3 crews out on the street every day doing leak detection, looking for water main leaks or breaks that haven't surfaced yet. We leak detect every mile that John plans on paving. We also have other projects that the Operations Department does. When John's CIP goes anywhere from 3 to 5 years out from when an issue is initially known, sometimes we can't wait 3 years. So we have an emergency sewer replacement contract, and during that, we provide the same process that the engineering department does. We give notice to the abutters 2 weeks in advance. We get a permit from Ed, who sets the parameters for the day, the time, when we can and can't work. If we need a detour, we submit that to Ed as well for approval. We also, when we have an emergency project, like we had a sewer backing up in the north end and the sewage was entering a building, we found the defect, we had to bring in a contractor. We do emergency flyers to the customers that are going to be impacted a couple of days before, if we know it's going to be 2 days. During an active emergency, we also have Dolores Randolph and her department, it's communications. They have people on site and help us coordinate with notifying the abutters. We also are responsible for coordinating with National Grid, Eversource, Vicinity, Boston Housing Authority, the MBTA, for water entering their systems. We've done a lot of investigations this past year on groundwater issues, or is it a water main leaking underground that enters their system. Obviously for Eversource and Vicinity, they can't have water intruding into their systems because that creates problems for them. How do we keep the public informed? We have a pretty extensive website. Every street that John goes to or my projects go to, if you click on your street in the website, it actually tells you the limits of the work, the scope of the work, and then it has a contact for who you can notify. When we have an emergency, Dolores again will put a notice up on the website, making sure that everyone is known. When we do have those emergencies, we have a BWSA emergency report that's generated. Again, John and Ed are included in that, as well as other people in Public Works. National Grid, Eversource, and Vicinity are all included in that notice. Obviously, in downtown area, if we are impacting the steam company, they want to know right away, and they won't let us dig if they have an issue on their system first. So we do coordinate with that as well. And then the last thing, unfortunately, people hit our utilities, whether it's a private contractor or another utility. Sometimes our records aren't extremely accurate, and where we think something is in the ground, somebody hits something and it creates an issue. Again, my team 24/7 responds to those locations and helps make a repair to get service reinstated to our customers.
Great. Thank you so much, Irene. Thank you to all the panelists. We're going to go straight to council questions, starting with Councilor Coletta. And just for colleagues, what I'm going to do is, I know people are going to have lots of questions for this panel, so I'm going to set a timer for 8 minutes. When that goes off, I'll just raise my gavel, and then you have another 2 just to wrap up. Okay? So, Councilor Coletta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for your initial comments and opening statements. Very, very informative. And of course, I'm approaching this conversation that I have a lot to learn. This is exactly why we're having this hearing. I'm very happy to hear that there is a lot of communication between all of you, while these projects are taking place, right? We heard about construction management plans, ensuring that those are good to go. And I'm wondering, just to back up a little bit and go to the front end of all of this, like if and whoever needs to, I think it might be John, if you could just walk me through the entire process or provide a workflow for us from start to finish. If I'm a utility company or a private developer or a quasi-governmental agency, I know that you said that you do utilize the COBUX system, and I want to either dig up the street or partially obstruct the street. What do I have to do? Who do I talk to? How does that system work? And then at the end of the day, I know that you get your approval from Public Works, and then you're out there and ensuring that they are compliant. But if you could just walk me through that process, and then anybody else who has information, please feel free to jump in.
Sure, I can do that, Councilor. So COBUX system was created back in about 2008, and it's basically a reservation system. So what we do is we use this COBUX system to protect our resurfacing program in the city of Boston. That is basically what it's meant to do. We do not want to pave a street and have an entity, whatever utility, come in and say, we now need to put a main through here, so they're going to dig up a newly paved road. So what we did is we have every street in the city listed. A utility, a private developer, contractor, private contractor would come in and put in a reservation. We would then enter into the system our work, our resurfacing work. Where there are conflicts, we can then start the conversation. Who's going to go in first and who's going to go in after? And sometimes, Water and Sewer will tell you, sometimes we say we have to do this street now and you will have to wait. So that is basically the gist of the COBUX system. It's a reservation system for use of our protecting our resurfacing system. A contractor would come in and they would, on a portal, put in their request to do the work with the limits and the type of work that it is. They also put in a time frame. Sometimes the bigger companies will put in a job that might be 3 or 4 years out so that we know that it's coming. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's something like a development that comes sooner and quicker, and we might only have 6 months to discuss this situation. There have been many times that we go out to resurface a street that we see in COBUX there's a conflict, and we have settled the conflict. We usually get them in, get them out so that we can resurface the street and the residents don't have to deal with a patch and a bump, if you will, on their nice new smooth ride. That's the gist of the COBUX system and why we use it.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
We also have private contractors building homes. They come to us, they get permission from us to connect to our pipe, but then on their own, they enter into COBUX system and they get their own permits from the city. So although it's a water and sewer service, it isn't ours till after it's installed. So it's the private contractor with a set of plans and they deal with the city directly.
Mm-hmm. And so because I just haven't seen it and I haven't worked with the system, at some point I would love like a demonstration where we're in and I could see everything, but using your words as a reservation system, is there a possibility, because this whole hearing is about coordinating and making sure that there aren't multiple things negatively impacting residents at any given time, is there an opportunity within this system to zoom out and see exactly what is happening in close proximity? I know that it goes from street to street, but what I'm asking for is consideration of impacts, not just on one street, but holistically, at least within certain neighborhoods. Is there an opportunity to do that, kind of look up and see the neighborhood and what's going on?
I would love to say yes, but no, we cannot do that. COBUX was created basically to protect the resurfacing system, so it doesn't work with occupancy permits. It doesn't have anything to do with those. It also doesn't input other work that might be going on from other things like development and stuff like that. Wouldn't really be recognized in the system. It's what is being dug, excavation, in the roadway, in the right-of-way for the city. That would be a great tool, but we do not have that tool. The system was created in the early 2000s, and technology has changed a lot, and I don't even think when we created the system at that point, we could have even envisioned that ability at that point.
Right.
So it has been in place since early 2008.
Do you have any year that we can point to?
2008 is
2008.
when we put it in place, so we probably started working on it late 2006.
Okay.
And back then, the mapping technologies have changed dramatically recently.
Sure. And I think we did put out an invitation to the Department of Information Technologies just to ask them exactly what this might look like and try to get a GIS mapping system. I feel like that is the, maybe not the silver bullet here, but just as a way to coordinate when there is a capital plan being pushed forth by Boston Water and Sewer, and we know that we have resurfacing work to do and there's utility work that needs to get done. And on top of all of this, there's the transparency aspect of it too. We don't have a front-facing public digital system or tool for the public to look up and just say, okay, what is happening on my street right now? I have no idea. And I think that that's what the goal of this hearing was for me. And so hearing that from you, that it's been in existence since 2008, that's a lot of years. That's about 15 years. So I think we need to update that. Do you have, and just moving on to the other bucket of this conversation, so you are in charge of enforcement and compliance of how our street looks like, or what our street looks like moving forward. What sort of enforcement mechanisms do you have? Do you have the ability to find certain companies that, have dug up a street and they did not leave things the way that they should, or there's still tools spread about the street?
No, we do not have any enforcement and fines. We did try that in the beginning when we created Construction Inspection Unit, CIU, but that was something we just weren't able to put together. What we do is we cost the contractors time, and that cost them money to slow them down. We would shut them down. The contractor would then have to arrange for what we call a shutdown meeting. So they would come to our facility at 400 Frontage Road and meet with our Construction Inspection Unit, and we would go over what the issues were, how we resolve them, and then at the end we started to make almost like a report card that would say, these people are good, these people are bad. We don't really have too many bad players. We have mistakes that are made, and we have a little bit of laziness or sloppiness sometimes, but most of the contractors out there know what we want, and they really do strive to do a good job. That's what we do with them. It's a lot of conversation, and it's a lot of working with them to get the job done in the manner that we want. Our inspectors go out every day, and they stop at these sites, and they go over the conditions, the plates, what they see out there for just even a traffic management plan or a pedestrian management plan. And then those results, if there are any problems, are brought to their management and brought towards my management.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add on that, with the Transportation Department, in combination with John's folks, I have a Boston police officer assigned with us, also myself, and if it's private development, outside of the utilities, if there are problems that residents are having, I know Councilor Flynn, we've been on site a few times relative to, the contractor or developer behaving correctly and taking, paying a little bit more respect to the community. We certainly have the ability to shut them down in tandem with Chris and Commissioner Leiden. So, we have the building permit, we have the street permit, and we basically have that as some leverage that we can get them to come into conformance and, in with their permits in respecting the community. So we do that quite often. And again, like John said, there's not a lot of bad players, but sometimes they get a little sloppy and they, get a little maybe lazy, and they need to pay a little bit more attention. So we give them that wake-up call. So, but overall, it's been working, fairly well. There's a lot of construction, but, we have good communication again, between John Polkworks, Chris, and ISD. We're a good team that if we're having problems with a specific contractor and whoever is, bailiwick or permit it is, we can assist them in making that the contractors comply to their permits. So that's on the private development side also.
Thank you, Ed.
Yep.
Do I get any leniency? Okay, I have one more question just while we're focused in on BTD a little bit. The frustration that I'm hearing from residents is that no matter who you are, you're pulling permits to that ultimately take up parking, right? And everybody loves their parking. And the frustration is that the permits have like a two-month window that ultimately always goes over. Who is responsible for signing off on those sort of permits? And then if a company goes beyond that, what sort of enforcement do we have to make sure that they are meeting that window? Because folks have said to me, I thought that I was going to have my street back by June, and it's August, and I still can't park there because they have permits taking up everything, and they still haven't done the work. So I'm wondering who has ownership of that.
That would be under my office and, my engineers and stuff. It's at the most, it's a 30-day permit. Nothing can be issued for over 30 days based on the scope of the work. And that gives us the opportunity after 30 days, if they're looking for a renewal, we want an update in the schedule of where they are and why the work is not completed. And that occurs on a daily basis in the department. I know with Commissioner Bach, actually Councilor Bach, soon to be Commissioner, but I deal with, Patricia Tully over at the Beacon Hill Civic Association, and your office with Avery, and there's a renewal. If there's questions, they're into my office. They want answers, we get the answers. So there is that renewal process that gives us the opportunity to team back with the contractor developer to get a schedule and get a justification of why they're looking for a renewal.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I can just jump in on that, Counselor, too. In the smaller jobs, just to piggyback on what Eddie was saying, on the smaller jobs that might only take a couple of days, we try to give them a little bit more time because the city gets weather. So when they go out to do a job that might take a week, if we just give them a week and we have 3 days of rain, then that pushes everything back, where if we have a small job, we might give them a 2-week window. The most we give is a 1-month window, but that does allow for that weather aspect of things. And there's also other things, maybe they're restricted in their time because there's a school and you can't work an 8-hour day. So a 3-day job might take 5 days. So there is a little bit of fluctuation on the back end. And usually we get done before the permit says, so we look good. The larger jobs go on and they do get renewals.
Thank you all. I do want to be respectful of my colleagues, so I will wait for the next round. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Coletta. President Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the panel for being here and providing important information to this hearing. On the COBUC system, do they have is there an opportunity to highlight if there are contractors that are not doing the right thing in terms of wage theft, in terms of OSHA violations? Are those types of issues noted in that system as well?
No, sir. That system is just basically to reserve the space for the resurfacing program.
Okay. Do we coordinate, and I know this is somewhat unrelated, but do we coordinate who the bad actors are for contractors as it relates to wage theft?
No, Counselor. I've never dealt with that.
Wage theft related issues?
No.
OSHA issues?
OSHA issues, we have a form that's a Maddox-Higgins form that is filled out yearly by the contractors or utilities that states that they attest that this is the information that they supply us if they've had any issues with OSHA in the last 3 years, and they sign off on that form yearly. That form is kept on file in our permitting office. It has to be attached to every permit that they submit through the portal. That's one of the requirements to get a permit. You have to have that form, Maddox-Higgins form, on every permit submittal.
Are we able to take another look at ensuring wage theft issues are maybe included in that?
Sure. I don't quite know how at this moment, but that sounds like an interesting prospect.
Okay. If there is a need to do emergency construction on a particular street, for whatever reason, whether it's a city, state agency, or it's it's National Grid, or if it's Eversource or another company. So with that emergency permit, the work would be done, but are we able to try to coordinate with other city or state agencies or with the construction companies that would normally do work? Are we able to figure out a system where maybe someone is trying to do some work on that particular street in a year from now, and the street is already open because of emergency work that is happening? But is there an opportunity to at least relay to that other city department that since the street is open, maybe you might want to take a look at the area, the street? Maybe there's an opportunity for you also to do some construction that you might have to do in the next year.
I think along those lines, Counselor, is like Dorchester Avenue Bridge, where the street's closed. We've encouraged and we've got good compliance, water and sewer, National Grid, to get in there and start doing their capital upgrades within the street while it's available during that time. So we try to take advantage of those type of situations where we're going to have a long-term event, and to get those upgrades in and proactively getting them in so it's a one-time and they're out and not back in. So anytime that we see an opportunity like that, we're obviously going for it.
Thank you, Ed.
I have another comment on that.
Sure.
Oftentimes Ed will call our office and identify that there's a private contractor coming in to do a service connection. If it's a water connection and our contractor's on the street, we allow our contractor to provide a quote to them so that it's done all at the same time. And also Ed will notify us so that if they want to get in and do a different type of connection, that we will then release the street for them for a day, and then they come back in after we're done.
Thank you, Irene. So let me just follow up again. But if there is emergency work taking place, we are at least as city agencies, state agencies, Eversource, and National Grid, we're at least talking with each other and letting them know that, you know, we're doing an emergency repair on Columbus Avenue in the south end. Just wanted to give you the opportunity. We know that you have something maybe scheduled in 6 months from now. Just want to give you the opportunity to let you know, and maybe it's something you might want to consider. I'm not saying that they have to do it, but at least we're all on the same page of communicating that the street is open for a period of 2 months or 3 months.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is that part of the in including in the COBUX system?
So that's actually part of an emergency notification.
Okay.
That basically electronic digitally, the utility will send in an emergency notification. That's an email blast out to all the players, utility companies, the agencies, et cetera, so that they're basically have that knowledge and the ability to react to that.
Oh, it's an email blast out to the different players?
Correct.
Okay.
So let's say if Irene says she has an emergency, she basically had, their dispatch will send out an emergency notification for a notification of public safety, for the departments, and the utilities in the area. So it's a good tool that we use.
Okay. I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'll stop there and let my other colleagues. So in response to what Councilor Coletta is thinking about in terms of, you know, how we can, and myself as well, coordinate with you and with agencies and with National Grid, Eversource. But what don't we have that we could implement? What are you thinking about right now that you wish we could have in the system, or what system don't we have that we could develop that might help us as we try to improve the quality of life for Boston residents? What's the recommendation you want us to do to improve quality of life for Boston residents? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to get advice, suggestions from you on what is outstanding that needs to be done in terms of potential coordination.
I think as John has pointed out, you know, we have basically a building block with the COBUX system that eventually that, you know, we have the ability, or we can have the ability to potentially look at expanding that platform to, you know, look at various ways that we may improve it for reservations and an overall, you know, bigger view of what's going on. But at this point, it's not, right now, it's not in the budget or discussion right now. But certainly something that we'll take back and we'll definitely be looking at.
So when you guys come for the budget hearings, could one of you recommend to the city council that, city councilors, we need more money in the budget for this system? And it might not be in the recommendations we already made to the mayor, but councilors, we want you to get it done. What do you say on that, John?
I think that would be great. I think that we need to bring in other departments like Do It to be in line with us, and we should build COBUX 2.0.
Excellent. Thanks for the great feedback. Thanks for the great work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, President Flynn. Next up is Councilor Murphy.
Thank you. It's always nice to be at a hearing where it's obvious you guys work well together. It's like how the city runs, the nuts and bolts, and it's just inspiring to hear all of you and so knowledgeable. So thank you for that. It's obvious that you don't need us to ask if you're working together, communicating, and doing your best to make sure that things run smoothly when there are roads shut down, construction going on around the city. And there's so many departments, and like you just mentioned, DeWitt, some that aren't even sitting in front of us right now, and coordinating all of those different departments and then the workers that are on the street, and is a lot. So I applaud that, but then kind of what Council President Flynn had ended on, we're coming into budget season, like what can we do on the council to help make sure that you have what you need to continue the coordination. And like you said, most, if not, almost all of the players out there, they want to do right. Sometimes things don't go right, but best intentions. So assuming that everyone has, out there with best intentions, what supports would you still need in place, if any, going forward, that you feel that aren't there for you now in your departments?
Well, I would think, we have two major programs, one in Southie and one in East Boston. They're 7-year programs. We are already planning to be at the location for 7 years. If there was a GIS system along with Cobucks, we could enter into it work we were planning to do 4 years from now, so that everybody else could pre-plan their capital programs together. But without a GIS, some kind of representation, you can't really put all the streets together. And you can't imagine, put a picture in front of you, and we could populate that, because in Southie we'll be there another 6 years and doing almost every street. And in East Boston, and we haven't finished the design, Counselor, that's why you don't have it yet, we're going to be doing most of the streets, taking water, sewer, and drain lines out. And we're going to be there a long time. And then when we do it, we will be interrupting the gas service, because we will be digging under them, so they're going to have to come in. And maybe communications and electrical will want to too. Street lighting may want to. So if we had a thing where we could not just worry about next year, but give a long term, and then graphically have it represented, probably through Cobucks. I love giving them extra work, so this is really a positive part. We could take all of our stuff that we're looking long term and input it, and everybody could see what we're planning.
Sounds good. I'm all set.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Mahia?
Yeah, thank you. I always say that Boston is resource rich, but coordination poor, right? So I'm happy to see that you all have a little channel, you have ways to communicate with each other, so that is really encouraging. And welcome, Chief. It is budget season, so we're going to get to know each other with the questions that we're going to ask you. No, I'm just joking. For those folks who have this personality caricature of me, don't believe the hype. Get to know me before you believe what you have been led to believe. I am not that difficult. But I do have some questions. Just curious, in terms of your multilingual and in your ability to get communication out to folks in multiple languages, what systems are in place when it comes to sharing information? I know that, I understand that the way the city ordinance that we passed not too long ago, that any information that was going to come out in the city of Boston in English was going to come out in multiple languages the same day, not like as an afterthought. So I'm just curious if that's something that has reached your departments.
As far as for Boston Transportation, yes. I mean, that whole executive order has come down. It's going through the office of the parking clerk, through our tow operations, and eventually comes out. So that is being worked into the mix.
And so when you have notices out, are those notices in multiple languages?
Right now, we're just engaging in that right now. Mm-hmm. So I know the office of the parking clerk does have something to that effect. Mm-hmm. I really can't speak. I mostly do construction, but we had a staff meeting as of yesterday, and that was a topic that definitely came up that we're moving into.
So for Boston Water and Sewer, when we send our notices out generally 2 weeks ahead of time for scheduled work, they're in English, but at the bottom of the document, it says this is an important notice, have it translated, and it's in like 8 different languages for that notice, so that the people get that translated. For our water main shutdown notices, currently it's in English and Spanish. We're actually reviewing that right now to see if we can get additional languages. We are also implementing a CSO plan for public notice of when our combined sewers overflow into the harbor or a navigable river. Those boards have a queue on them that it takes you to a website, and then you select what language you want that to be translated to.
That's great. That's great. And I believe you guys are quasi, right? So you guys really don't answer to nobody. No, I'm just joking. I'm teasing. Then I guess I'm always going to be just looking more into making sure that people know that they have access to information. I think what I see here is, there has to be some sort of mechanism aside from just communicating amongst yourselves, but that you are able to tap into maybe some of the businesses that are nearby. Is there some communication with the local businesses, or just focusing on abutters, in terms of outreach? What other types of strategies are you using?
When we did Blue Hill Avenue, there's a bunch of businesses there. We went door to door. We had leaflets. We spoke to them all, informed them what was going on, how long we'd be there, and took their input, but they just said, we know it's necessary. Please go fast.
So hurry up. I said, hurry up and get this project done with.
Yeah. And 6 months later, we said, we're done.
Good job.
Ish.
Done-ish. Well, fake done. Was like halfway done.
Pretty much done.
A bootleg operation, depending on who you ask done.
Well, then sometimes right after us has to come a utility, because we may have disturbed their bidding. So they may need to come in after us.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, because I've always been so intrigued, even as a resident before I became a U.S., I was going to say U.S., what the hell was I thinking, a city councilor. They would work on my street, and I don't know what they were doing, but somebody was doing something on the sidewalk, and then they would pave it, and everything would be done, and then another crew would come and do some more work, and they would have to open up the street again and close it. So I'm just curious, and this is a silly question, but I'm going to ask anyways. It's not a council hearing unless I ask a silly question. But is it possible to coordinate to the degree where you're going to just have all of the people who need to do something just organize themselves in a way that has the most minimal impact on the length of time, so that you roll it out? So let's just say, water and sewer will be here for May through June, right? And then so-and-so, whoever needs to do whatever they need to do, will be here from such and such. Is there a way to streamline the work so that the impact is, because you complete a project and then 5 or 6 months later, you're back there again.
I can speak to that, Councilor.
Yeah.
It's the basis of what you're saying is what we do. There's not a timeline put on it, but as John was mentioning about Blue Hill Avenue.
Yeah.
So they went down, and I believe you were down some 35 feet in that location. And on Blue Hill Avenue, being a very old part of the city, the gas main there is made out of cast iron, which is in 6-foot sections. And the hole that they dug, I don't want to say it disturbed it, but we don't want to take that chance. The grid doesn't want to take that chance. So when Water and Sewer gets done with their work, National Grid is going to come in and they are going to change the main, and go from there. But there's no timeline given, so when they're out of the way, if I can say it that way, because even if they're up the street, they could be affecting the flow of traffic, they could be affecting businesses and parking. So when Water and Sewer is out of the way, then National Grid will come in and they will repair the main that, I don't want to say it was damaged, it wasn't damaged, but we don't want to leave it in that condition, and they will do their work. Their work could take less time because our folks down here might have hit some rocks, some ledge, things like that. The gas main might be a little higher. as the gas main goes down the street, they could have a problem with the electrical line being in the way, and then they have to come in. But there's no parameters as in, you come in September and be done by October. Water and sewer is in there now, then we'll let National Grid in. When they are done, we will let anybody else in that has to do it. As a result of all the work, the roadway would be disturbed, and we would look to have that roadway resurfaced, which would probably be about the following year.
Right. And it's important to note that when we get through with our work, we have to make the area safe for the citizens. So it looks like a permanent patch and everything else. Well, cars are going to drive over it, people are going to walk. We got to make sure we ensure the safety of all citizens. Right. While we're out and we're waiting for the next guy to come in, that it looks great shape. So that's why it looks like we are doing a finished job. Yeah. In reality, it's not final finish that the city will come in later to do. It's safe for the pedestrians.
See, I appreciate that we're having this conversation because I'm telling you, there are people who think that you're not planning and coordinating, but just this whole idea that it looks like it's finished, it's really about the safety. And I think it's really important for those folks who are tuning in to understand the process because people make a lot of assumptions. So, you know, I know I was joking a little bit, but I do appreciate you all taking the time to help those who are tuning in understand what's at play. And I heard the gavel. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I'm never going to hassle you with the gavel again. You have to complain about someone else doing it. Okay, I'm going to ask a few questions and then I will go back to colleagues again, just if anybody's got any follow-up. But I do want to note we've got National Grid and Eversource who are joining us, and we've also got some folks from some of the civic organizations that were mentioned before by Councilor Coletta, one of whom I'm going to go to as soon as we're done with this panel, just so that we can get them in before they have to leave. So just making that note for colleagues, if we can keep second round, any questions quite short, that'd be great. So yeah, on my end, one question I have is, do we make a distinction in the internal system between excavation on the streets that's going to result in a narrowing of the street versus excavation that's going to result in a closure of the street? So something that takes up the whole street such that we're going to be directing people around. I assume that we do, Ed, and I guess I'm kind of curious though, is that formalized? Because one of my agendas completely separate from this is for the city to eventually get to a place where we send out automatic notifications about street closures in the city. It's something we hear about all the time, and obviously that can be for a parade or it can be for digging, so I know it's not all this system, but I'm kind of curious whether the distinction is made in the system.
Absolutely. When the contractor or utility submits the permit application that comes in to the online portal, they're required to upload a traffic management plan that shows the street dimensions, shows the work zone dimension, the available bike lanes, travel lanes, and basically what that impact's going to be where we evaluate that drawing. I can tell you that less than 10% of permits that we issue for excavation are for street closures. We do not issue street closure permits, only in rare circumstances, because we want them to do it per construction methodology that maintains that street. So we look to work with those contractors on their construction methodology and what they do and how they maintain those important street openings to keep people in traveling both by vehicular or by bus or by, cycle. We look at that in those drawings, and my engineers review those very thoroughly. So there's very rarely that we will issue a street closure. Does it happen? Absolutely. And that's when we dispatch our people up there to make sure that they come into compliance with that permit and do not close the streets.
And if in theory we were to have a citywide notification system that was letting people know, hey, today these are the streets that are closed in your zip code or whatever, like you have the back end data that could feed into such a system?
I'm not a technical on the system, the permitting system on the technical end of it. I'm not sure if that's possible. I'm sure that it may be, but I'm not familiar enough with the program itself to be able to give you a good answer on that, but I certainly can find that out for you.
Yeah, and it's a thing, and also for the deputy chief, it's a thing, I would say that I'm going to follow up on, but I'm of course soon going to be trying to coordinate with you all about closures at BHA, so I'm aware of a role change here. But I do think that I want to vocalize as the District 8 counselor that we've, currently it feels like the various agencies tell us about street closures, some more consistently than others. They're often just coming in sort of PDF notices. If you're a super involved resident and you sign up for my newsletter and my newsletter happens to go out a day before the closure, then you're in luck. But if all of those stars don't align, you don't necessarily find out about it. And I do think that's something, it's beyond this conversation, but this conversation would be part of it. For us to just think about how we communicate better.
And I just add on that, my folks also sit on the special events committee within the events and tourism, who actually does that work with the the events that come up and notifications per se on these events. So I will bring it to that forum also.
Yeah, that would be great. And then it has seemed to me anecdotally like we are in some cases, but not always, maintaining the bike lane when we are making these construction sort of navigation plans. It came up recently related to some of the utility work around Symphony Station in my district, and just how, and obviously that's somewhere where we've had a bicycle fatality in the recent past. So just wondering if you can speak a little bit to the question of, maintaining the bike lane access when folks are coming down and they're expecting that, and then suddenly it disappears.
Right, and that's a high priority within the department, right, as now. As we've been implementing these miles of bike lanes, et cetera, it's become very important within the traffic management plan to accommodate that when it can be accommodated, but also if it cannot, to invoke the proper signage for notification that it's a shared lane. Bikes may use full width of the lane to get that public safety signing in the traffic management plan for these constructors. So it's very important for us. It's something that my engineers have been charged with, and they are looking at that as we speak. And that's been for the last couple of years, so it's evolving. And we're really getting the message out to the utilities, private development, as a increase out onto our roadways.
Great, excellent. Definitely just important to me. And then I know we have this system, which I think that we sort of in Boston were relatively early to pilot, and others have copied this system of putting those little colorful tiles in the patches on the road when folks do that patchwork. So that's, if folks have ever seen in the city what looks like a bottle cap embedded in the asphalt, and you think that it's some piece of litter left behind, it actually is telling us which entity did the roadway patch, so that if it's not up to snuff, we can hold them accountable for it later. I am kind of curious. I hear you, John, on the, obviously this whole system is pivoting around resurfacing. It still seems anecdotally like there's quite a large number of streets where we live with patches for quite a long time before we get back to do a full resurface. So I'm kind of curious, like, what the failure rate of those are, like, and how often we're actually chasing up people about an inadequate patch, and kind of, if you can just talk me through, like obviously the system's designed to hold people to account, so then kind of what does that look like?
So the tags that you see recognize who did the work, what year they did the work. Most of the failures on that come through either settlement, so the deeper you go, the more chances you have of the material around that piece of pipe moving as things settle. So the failures tend to be either rather quickly, because we have some settlement, or one of the failures that we have is there's so much work in the city, so much development, that the crews that we have making these permanent restorations, so that would be a gray tag with the city on there, the crews that we have doing the permanent restorations, they're doing a good volume of work, but they're not keeping up with the amount of utility work that goes on in the city. Every time we build a large high-rise, they're bringing in a gas main, an electric main, and things like that to service the new buildings. So there is a little bit of a lag, and we're trying to keep up. Some of the failures come because the patches tend to get a little bit old. The utilities are responsible for those patches for the first 3 years. If anything is older than 3 years, the city would go in and repair whatever needs to be repaired.
And how often is that happening? Like how far are we, like if because if we have this guarantee period that's 3 years, but it's actually sort of taken us 5 to get back to resurfacing the road, I mean, what's the gap like these days?
Usually at that point, the patch has settled and things are maintaining pretty well. It's usually the failures come, I'm going to say within the first year, usually the first 6 months, because of the settlement around this work that they did. They've disturbed this area that has been sitting there solid for years, and there will be movement. That's why the city has designed it for the utilities to go in, and they put in what is a temporary patch, and after 120 days, we like to go in and make that a permanent patch. Having the winter season, sometimes those get extended, but most of the failures happen just in the beginning. There'll be some movement.
And then on the timing front, so I appreciate the coordination in terms of like one thing after another that you guys are doing. It does feel, and this relates to the question that was asked right at the beginning, Mr. Hesford, about these 30-day permits and then the extension. I'll certainly say that anecdotally, and I'm just going to use Beacon Hill because I walk from City Hall to there every day. Anecdotally, it seems as though, for instance, a large company in the city that is frequently doing street work has like reserved an awful lot of spots for this street work, and on any given day they're only on one of these streets, and it seems to me like they have a worker capacity problem to be working at all the places at once, but they, having reserved the space, don't appear to have like a lot pushing them to finish efficiently in any given place. And I think that's certainly the perception of my constituents. So I'm kind of curious what, if any, incentive we put in place for folks to not, because I can easily see with the reservation system, I mean, it's like if there weren't a penalty and I hadn't made a decision on where I wanted to take somebody for dinner, I just might reserve 3 or 4 different restaurants and ghost 3 of them, right? So I can sort of see the incentive where somebody would put a bunch of reservations in your system and then not have the full staff capacity to do that, but then it's sort of no skin off their nose. I mean, I'm sure there's a bit of money related to it, but not enough to change the behavior. So I guess I'm curious if we could delve into that a little bit and any suggestions you have to maybe help our contractors focus on like bites that they can actually chew, as it were.
In speaking with the reservations, the contractors are really not supposed to stockpile any materials on the roadway, things like that. It's a little bit difficult for us to control if they're working late and they leave some material there. Mostly plates. You'll find some people leave some plates around and we get on them about that. But when they have a permit on a street from beginning to end, they have those no parking signs, and they do use those no parking signs with a monthly date on there, and they do take up a lot of space. I don't know how we can rectify that off the top of my head, but that's something that we can put our heads together to maybe give them smaller areas or try to control them a little bit more. But it's very difficult to do because we know that they need to do the street from the beginning to the end, and to break it into blocks. If we start to micromanage too much, they might put no parking signs up in the wrong block associated to the wrong address, things like that that might bring other difficulties in there, but that's something Ed and I can talk about and try to.
Well, and I guess, and again, it might be a little bit of a zoom out question too, because my objection isn't even that they're doing all of Anderson Street. It's that the same guys have a contract for all of Anderson Street, all of Charles Street, like a significant section of Myrtle Street, and they're like only on one of them at once. And yet we've got like, we've got the water filled barriers taking up spots. We've got kind of like random pipes sitting around. And it's just like, I mean, if I could reserve half the hill to store my materials and cars overnight, I would do it too. Like, again, right? Like, I mean, incentives, like it makes sense, but I just think like it feels as though we should have some check that says, can you really do all this work right now? And if not, can we actually prioritize it? And hey, you might have to store some of your stuff back in your yard, Yeah,
and specifically to Anderson Street. I know it's been a problem, and I've had numerous conversations with Feeney Brothers and with National Grid. Joe's here, he can answer that, but there's certainly something, there's some technical issues that they get into while they're working on a street. They're waiting for parts of pipes or, joints, et cetera, and they have to move on while that is in stock, because there's a lot of issues with getting materials in on time because of delays, et cetera. But we try to work with the contractor to take signs down as they're not working, to give the residents the opportunity for that parking during that time. So that's a conversation I've been having with National Grid, with Terry Cleary, and with the contractor, Feeney Brothers, to make sure that, they're not taking up the area that they don't need or they're not working. And when they need to do that, then repost the street. So that's a conversation that's going on right now.
Great, and very much appreciate you having it. All right, that's my time. So Councilor Coletta?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your questions. I would say it is anecdotal for you. It is also anecdotal for me, where I thought it was the norm. Like, I thought that you are allowed to store your materials on the street. That's just how bad it has gotten in East Boston. And so just thinking through these 30-day extensions, what you were describing is exactly what's happening in Eastie. I'm wondering if, you said that they have to come back to you, right? It's every 30 days. And apologies if I misspoke earlier. I thought it was 2 to 3 months worth of a window because that is what's happening. So if they come back to you and they say, okay, can we do another extension for 30 days? Can we cross-reference like 311 tickets, for example, where somebody has put in like, hey, these materials have been here. Can we do something about this? Like code enforcement, working with John, just to reel in some of these bad actors. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in specifically East Boston, with your staff, who I deal with Sebastian, all the time, on specific issues that come in that he's receiving or he's seeing, and through the 311, we'll get that, and we can team back with the permittee to basically go over, corrective actions and have that discussion. So that's going, and we really appreciate, especially yourself and the staff, all your staffs, input into that process. You're your constituents and your staff are the ears and eyes on the ground that sometimes we don't hear about. So we like that, and we're working in that order to basically be more proactive to respond to those types of things when we hear about that. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I kind of want to bring it back a little bit too, and I promise I'll be brief because we do have some folks just waiting from the public to provide some comments. We have some folks in the audience as well waiting to get down. But it seems like it really should be, based on what you were saying from Boston Water and Sewer, that you are at the lowest level. Well, the transit system is, and then it's Boston Water and Sewer, and then it might be utility companies, and then whatever else. What is that the standard process to which street work happens? Do you have to get in there first? Is there a policy on the books where you need to get in first and then utility companies?
It's best practice, I think, right, John, to get the deepest structure done first and then work your way up.
Is there any sort of like ordinance on the book or any policy where you are mandated to go in first and then the city of Boston understands, okay, if there's any utility work that needs to happen, understanding that there's emergency work that usually needs to get done?
Well, so sewer pipes can last 100 years. You may rebuild the street 5 times during that 100 years. You may replace a gas main in the 40th year, a new electric may get down there in the 60th year. We televise our sewers and see what shape they're in. So we can say it's in good shape, we're not doing anything. The water mains, they last about 100 years. So we have cleaned and lined the inside of most of them already. And then we take a judgment call, whether the pipe is ever broken, whether we can wait another 5, 10 years for it is not a problem. So it's really a judgment call on all this stuff, depending on how old. There is not enough money to replace everything you own when someone else has an opportunity to get in there. So we want to make sure that people don't build on top of us. So when we do go in there, we don't have them move. We go and do our stuff, they have to come back. So that's the coordination that we do work.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, so generally when they're doing the shallower water mains though, National Grid with their contractor usually come in ahead of us because we're here and they're kind of piggybacked right on our shoulder. We're 5 feet down, they're 3 feet down. So we coordinate with National Grid and those notice letters when we're doing water work, we'll say National Grid will be coming in ahead of us to move their water main or their gas main, and then we'll come in behind them. So when we do just the water side, we are advising them it's kind of like a 2-phase project. And then Joe and his team will send us locations where they do need to get in, and they have their own requirements for encroachment For 8-inch cast iron mains and smaller, they must replace them. So we do a lot of coordination with National Grid. And they usually come in ahead of us, except on large sewer jobs that are deep. If there's no place for them to move ahead of us, they come in behind us. But they're monitoring their gas main the entire construction process to make sure it's not leaking.
This is all just very fascinating. Is there an opportunity for us to maybe take a field trip out to one of your work sites and actually watch you all do this and fully understand? I mean, it's easy to sit here, but for everything that you all do, I think for us to be better counselors, to advocate for our district efficiently, I think we all need to have a better understanding of how all of this works, which is why we're here. But I think having a front row seat would be beneficial to me. So would you all be open
I'd love
to
to
that?
do that.
Okay, under all the safety guidelines and everything? Perfect, I'm seeing heads nod. Awesome. My last question is just around notice, and I'm very happy that my council colleague Mejia asked about language accessibility and just trying to get the word out there as best as we can. I would like to see, and I guess this is more of a suggestion rather than a question, but I would love to see at some point this notice system that Councillor Bach is saying in all languages based on what is required through census tracts, right? In East Boston, it's English, Spanish, and Arabic. Actually, we have a high population of Moroccan individuals in our neighborhood, and having it go out electronically, or at least having somebody put the notice on your door in the same way we do it with the Butters meetings. I do get things in the mail from Boston Water and Sewer. It is in English, though. It's in only English, unless I got a faulty notice. But is there supposed to be some sort of piece of paper that says, please have this translated if you don't speak English?
It's at the bottom of the letter.
Okay.
It's right at the bottom in the footer. It'll say, have this important notice translated in like eight languages.
And it says that in 8 languages. Okay, then I missed that, and thank you for clarifying that. I would like to have everybody just go out to the community groups as well, and really utilizing social media as a way to get information out there. That's where people find their information. So just encourage all of you to try to utilize that as best as you can. And then let us know too, because we have a wide network. We have newsletters, we have our own social media channels, and we want to be dispersing the most accurate information possible, right? So we should all be on the same page from the very beginning. And then that way we're not getting questions like, hey, what is going on? And then we don't know, right? We just want to make sure that we're coordinating with all of you. So that's it. I just want to thank you all again for being here. This is really informative. I look forward to future conversations with Do It maybe and figuring out how much this will cost, this technology, and making sure you all are at the table to ensure it's working both for you, residents, and everybody in the City Council. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Coletta. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you to the panel. I'll try to be brief. One issue that I've focused on probably the most over the last 6 years is pest control. And continue to have conversations and hearings on it with my colleagues and with the mayor's team. How important is pest control during the construction phase, and what are you looking at, and what's your responsibility in terms of pest control services during construction and after construction?
On our major contracts, we have an item for pest control. Contractor's responsible. We work closely with ISD, who gets most of the complaints on the pest control, and we will tell our contractor that if the particular area's got a problem, he's got to put more traps out.
So on any type of construction taking place in the city, is ISD have the overall responsibility on pest control? Chris?
I think it's a combination of folks that we generally handle the private property or public alleyways or sewers.
Well, what I'm trying to do is, and I think the City of Boston, the workers that work on pest control issues, I think they do an exceptional job. I think we need more resources and funding. But what I would like to do is have one department that overall works on pest control outreach, pest control strategy, whether it's someone from, whether it's, or maybe it's a different department, a new department. But is there one, but we don't really have one person or one agency that's responsible for everything relating to pest control during any type of construction in the city?
It's primarily ISD.
Oh, it is? The same,
I can tell you on large construction projects, ISD will send over whether it's a low, medium, or high level of active rodent activity in the neighborhood. Once that's stipulated, then the conditions that go into the contract book identifies how much rodent control you must do, whether you're baiting once a week, checking it once a week, every other week, once a month. So then the contractor has to then go out before he even starts construction. For our jobs, he baits all of our drain and sewer manholes and all of our catch basins. Unfortunately, that's sometimes where they live. And so once they do their next inspection, if that bait has been eaten, they have to rebait the system. So we can see what kind of activity is going on.
okay, that's good to know. What can I do to help improve, or what can my colleagues do to help improve the quality of life of residents on pest control during construction and after construction? Is there something that we can focus on that would improve public health, that would improve the quality of life for residents?
I'm not sure how effective our systems are. We believe they're very effective in controlling what we can, and then we wait for the call, which generally go to ISD, and they'll call us, and so we coordinate increased pest control when there's a breakout. So that's what we'll do.
Chris, how many ISD inspectors do we have that work on pest control?
14.
Is that enough?
I think we're adequately staffed at the moment.
What is that, Chris?
I think we're adequately staffed at the moment.
Even with the ongoing construction throughout the city, in neighborhoods in the downtown area and these major projects, 14 inspectors?
Yes.
Well, I think we need more. And I'm going to advocate for more. I think you probably, well, let me stop there. I think the residents really need more resources to deal with this public health challenge that we're facing. But 14, how many are on the weekends, Chris? How many work on the weekends?
None.
So from Friday afternoon to like Monday morning, we don't have any?
We have on-call work, so it's on an as-needed basis. They work 24 hours, so if they get called out, that can happen on the weekends, overnights. But we don't have full-time shifts that occur over the weekend. Their shifts start at 4 a.m. on Monday, and we have a 4 a.m., 6 a.m., and an 8 a.m. shift.
How come we don't have them on the weekends?
We haven't really needed them.
Okay. I would like to have them on the weekends. I think they would really help improve conditions in the city on the weekends. Especially we see construction that does take place, say it on a Saturday, and they get an emergency permit, but also you see a lot of these parties that take place also, and people throwing litter boxes or pizza stuff on the ground. But this issue is really critical, and I know I spend a lot of time on it, but I would like to continue to work with you, Chris, and your team, because it's one of the top issues that I hear from residents is pest control, and it impacts every neighborhood. Anyone else have any issues? Anything else that you could relay that could be helpful to me on pest control issues? No. Final question. How important are police details during construction sites?
So police details as a requirement, you know.
Mr. Hesford,
Yep, sorry about that.
we can always hear you, but on the live stream, they can't always hear
Sure.
you if you don't speak into the mic.
I mean, police details are a component of the traffic management plan submittal, and that we review and basically, you know, put into the permit the numbers that would be required for a certain activity. That is part of the public safety plan, the traffic management plan. So, you know, they're based on what the scope or the invasiveness of the work is, basically is how we require that component of the permit.
Okay. No, that's good information. In the majority of times, when a street has to be, when construction has to take place on a street, the street is partially closed, not fully closed. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I say that because when it is partially closed, you do need police presence in the interest of public safety to navigate traffic, but also on pedestrian safety issues as well, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ed. Madam Chair, thank you, and thanks for the important work you're doing, Madam Chair, and to my colleague, Councilor Clutter, as well.
Thank you so much, President Flynn. I just have a couple quick questions, and then I do want to I'm going to get to Andrew Pike on virtual testimony because I know he's got to go in a minute. So just a quick follow-up on the details. Is there some kind of priority for the utility work? The reason I'm asking is because I've been mystified, and sorry that this has turned into a Beacon Hill clinic, but I've been mystified by the fact that we quite consistently have an officer on Anderson when the work is going on, but we can't get an officer for love or money down at MGH where we've got like really serious trucks crossing a really major pedestrian intersection. I think this has to do with the need for us in the police contract to change so that we can prioritize, and I recognize this is not the right forum for that question, but I did find myself wondering whether there was some kind of prioritization for the utility work that was causing that dynamic, and so because they're the same time frame, so it's not like a time frame difference. So I wondered if anyone here would have any insight on that.
I'm not speaking for the police, but, you know, they have their own detail system that they've worked out. It's a requirement on our permits for number of officers, but I'm glad to report that Mass General, as of recently, there's been a lot of activity with the police on those gates now, and it's really getting filled, so we're very happy about that.
No,
It was a concern of ours as well.
That's great. That's excellent. Yes, no, and we've been pushing on it, so I'm really glad to hear that. Okay, and then just, you guys don't, I know we said the Cobalt system, you don't really do the construction you do construction safety in your office, but for instance, these issues about, obviously we've had a couple of tragedies in the city of Boston with people not using kind of the types of boxes that we would want to really hold the space and protect the workers when they're underground. Like, do you guys have any flags that go up? Like, hey, this is a company that has had this issue in the past. Let's really make sure that they're actually putting braces in and stuff.
We look at all excavations, and the process of the Maddox-Higgins, they are to tell us what they've had for any kind of violations, and that would allow us to key in on certain people that might have some violations, but it also prevents them from getting permits. If they have violations that are numerous and things like that, they could quite possibly not even get a permit in the city of Boston. We do not get involved with OSHA. We allow OSHA to do their job. If there was an instance that we had a situation and someone's in a 12-foot trench with no shoring, yeah, we would notify somebody, but we do not have jurisdiction, I think the word would be, to do OSHA's work. We just maintain the backfilling. That's what we're looking for, to make sure that they do it properly, use the proper materials from the proper plants, and that the surface is properly restored.
Got it. But we have had an issue, right, recently with Maddox-Higgins. If we don't really have any internal check if somebody falsely files a form saying that they're...
That's correct.
Right. So that remains an issue that I think we need to continue to tackle. And then my last sort of miscellaneous question about this is just, do you guys ever get into the question of the size of vehicles or equipment that can be on the roadway? I ask this because we've had a couple of cranes come through Pinckney Street that have taken out trees because they're like way too big for the street that they were going down. And I'm just curious whether in your approval of these plans, you ever say, gee, that looks like much too big of an apparatus for the street that you're going to be on.
Yes, so when it comes to cranes or boom trucks, et cetera, they do submit the specifications and the obstructions, so if the tree canopy is in the play, they're going to have to downsize to a specific crane size. So we actually do look at that as far as is it a 30-ton crane or a 50-ton crane, and basically what's the swing radius and what the tree canopy is or any other structures. They're required as part of their PIC plan is to identify that problem and mitigate it before we'll issue a permit.
And so you have the tree canopy as like one of the things that's in your system?
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear, even if we haven't managed to prevent these situations. Okay, great. Well, so I think those are my main questions. I think the two big takeaways that I would offer, and again, in the spirit of somebody who's about to cross the line and come worry about water and sewer and gas and electric in some of the city property that the BHA holds. But I think just from a councilor perspective, the two big takeaways for me are, one, this is a piece of the puzzle of how do we communicate better with residents about street closures. And I think how do we, like Councilor Coletta and Flynn have said, how do we move towards a system where there's like a little, and I recognize it's a different system than COBUC, but like, how do we move towards a system where some of this great information that you all have internally can be more easily communicated out? And even, and it's no fault of it, it's just like even the water sewer system, it sounds great, but we know that somebody actually navigating to the BWSC website and finding it, we just know as counselors that a lot of that stuff is just like every time you add a step, you decrease the chances that somebody's going to find it. So if there was a way for us to be collating more and letting people say, hey, this is the zip I'm really interested in, right? Or this is the census tract I'm interested in. Will you let me know? Ping me whenever there's something here. I think that would be amazing. But recognizing DeWitt's not in the room, and that's probably a future DeWitt conversation. And then this other question is about how we crack down on folks who are biting off more than they can chew and sort of avoid systems where, and especially, look, I get supply chain issues, but to me, everybody is suffering supply chain issues right now. If the new normal is that you're waiting on critical pieces for 9 months, then you need to adjust your schedule or just wait until the pieces are in to start. Is kind of how I feel about it. So I just think thinking about how do we do that, because that's a real pain point, I would say, for the residents that we hear about. But thank you all so much. Thanks for all making so much time in your day. And we're going to go now to Andrew Pike, who's been waiting very patiently with us from the Jeffreys Point Neighborhood Association, because he's got to get it in before he jumps off. And then I'm going to go to Eversource and National Grid for some comments and counselor questions. So we'll see if we can pull up Andrew on the Zoom. I'm hoping he's still there.
Hello.
Okay, great, Andrew. We can see you and hear you. Go ahead.
Excellent. Sorry, I had to join as a panelist. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time today, and I think this is a very important topic. And I know for a fact that Councilor Coletta was inundated with phone calls from the community, especially last summer. I live in the Jeffreys Point area of East Boston, and last summer we had a considerable amount of, I believe the majority of it was Boston Water and Sewer work happening on multiple streets in the neighborhood. It's obviously not just Boston Water and Sewer that is causing, and I don't mean to use this word, but that's, for the lack of a better one, the issue. It's all of the utilities and the coordination. And this conversation today has been very eye-opening. It's concerning to me as a citizen of this city that we're utilizing a system that is over 15 years old that was clearly meant to do just one thing as a way to communicate with other entities within the city as to what's going on and when. It definitely sounds to me like a major investment in new infrastructure and communicating between departments is necessary. We had so much construction going on in this neighborhood between private developers and Boston Water and Sewer last summer that the MBTA just decided to up and completely stop running one of their bus routes through our neighborhood, which many of the seniors and people who might be disabled rely on a daily basis, basically with no notice, and nobody knew it was happening, and we had to fight to get it back. And their statement was that they weren't able to operate their buses down the street because there was so much construction going on. I also wonder if that's another piece of the puzzle that we need to be making sure of when projects are happening, that the MBTA is notified. So if they do need to adjust routes or anything like that. Going to the parking issue, which is one of the biggest ones. Currently, we have a Boston Water and Sewer project going. Actually, this isn't parking. Excuse me. The police detail. Boston Water and Sewer currently has a project going on right now at the intersection of Sumner and Orleans Street. It's been going on for a couple of weeks now. They're in the direct middle of the intersection. This is basically like the main thoroughfare into Jeffreys Point. It's also, Orleans Street also connects to the Boston Harbor Shipyard and Marina, which receives a significant amount of large 18-wheel trucks going into that shipyard. Right now, Orleans Street is down to one lane. Sumner Street has been basically almost blocked with the exception of a small portion of it, the entry to Jeffreys Point. No police detail for days and days and days. We've had basically 18-wheelers coming head-to-head with residents' cars, myself included, and there's no one there directing traffic. It's a major issue. I've spoken to A7 about it. They say that they don't have enough staff in order to fill it. They know that it's supposed to be there. So if there's a traffic management plan in place and the person who's doing this project is required to follow through with this traffic management plan, why is that being left empty? This particular project that's happening right now, I am completely surprised that a pedestrian hasn't been hit or a car has not had an accident. I'm just shocked that it hasn't happened. Going to the parking part, the Councilor Coletta and a Councilor, I'm sorry, I think I forgot your name, Bach, I apologize, both stated something that I was going to state. There are frequently time periods where no parking signs get put up, and it could be a whole week, nobody's there. They'll put the parking sign up, and a lot of the times these parking signs go up with very, very short notice. So anybody that was parked there is going to need to end up moving their car, or they're going to end up being towed because there was barely any notice given to the parking restriction. Last summer on my street in particular, I don't know if it was last summer, but whenever they most recently came around to trim the trees, they would put a sign up stating the day before they were going to do it, stating that they were going to come and trim the trees and that there was no parking. The signage that they put up was not official City of Boston signage. It was handwritten, and it didn't look real, to be honest with you. And so I questioned it and found out that it was real and that they were coming. They'd put it up. Days and days would go by, nobody would come by. People wouldn't park there for maybe the first 2 days, but then people just gave up and said, hey, I'm going to park here anyways. And then when the tree guys finally did come, people were parked there, so they weren't able to do their work. So it's making it difficult for them on the back end as well. I think that we definitely need to have a better system in place where all departments are communicating together. And I love the idea of them being able to look on a bigger picture as to what's going on in the neighborhood, because East Boston last summer was a mess. It was a mess. You could not go anywhere in the city without encountering some sort of detour or road closure, and none of it was informed ahead of time, at least not in a way that most residents can access. So I think that's all for me.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you for being with us through the whole hearing. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to all of our panelists from Boston Water and Sewer and from the city. I am going to invite, I'm going to let you all yield these seats up front here, and then invite National Grid to come down and join us and check whether we still got Eversource on the virtual.
Counselor, I'd like to say one thing.
Oh, sure,
And I just want
absolutely.
to congratulate you on your new endeavor, and I look forward to working with you at the BHA.
Thank you, right back at you. I'm very excited about it, and yeah, but this has been a great job, and I'm also extremely excited about that work. So, thank you. All right. I think we may have lost our virtual Eversource person, so you guys might be alone for a moment. But thank you to National Grid for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And it would be great if you could just start by introducing yourselves, and we'll take any opening statement.
Sure. First of all, Madam Chair, thank you for the invite, Council President, Council Coletta. My name is Joe Carroll. I have 36 years, started at Boston Gas in the field, and through several administration, and with your all-star cast that was here, that is the right word for them, and been working with them for a very long time through that. And before I turn it over to Peter, I just want to put my word out there. Council President Flynn mentioned he would need an advocate for the new coal box system. Adding that up, I'm all for it. All right, and I'll explain a little bit more when we go through.
Good afternoon. Peter Nagel from National Grid. Thank you for having us here today, and just look forward to answering any questions. I work in Joe's group, and typically what I do is deal with the your staff's complaints to me when we have issues. In addition, my name appears on one of the letters that Joe will reference that goes out to your folks and city officials, alerting folks to our planned work in each of the neighborhoods.
Great, excellent. Thank you both for introducing yourselves. And then, and did you have any further opening statement you wanted to make?
Sure. If it's okay, I'll try to run through, and as we listen, I'll try to highlight, some of that. I'm sure there'll be some questions following it. But again, as I mentioned, Joe Carroll, Director of Corporate Affairs for this area, with the experience. And within the city board that you had sitting here, from Public Works, Transportation, ISD, also another key component is the Neighborhood Services Group as well, from that, apart from your office. So that collaboration and coordination is critical. We certainly are probably, if not number one, but maybe number two in terms of permitting from the work that is going on. And just to put it up, it really is for the betterment of the city, understanding logistically it doesn't look that way. And and I know Councilor Cledd, you mentioned maybe coming out in the field, especially with some of water and sewer. I would love to bring you out as well for that, just to see the scope of where it is. First off, it's all about public safety. Council President Flynn has mentioned that from that end. I know there were some questions about the work zone, where it is from that end. It is a key component of everything that we do at National Grid is public safety from that end. From the scope of the work that we do, and we'll delve into a little bit more, we do have scheduled work. We do have emergency work. We're also regulated by the DPU, so we do have mandated work as well that we must ensure is completed on time. Within the permits, I think that Nick had mentioned, we average somewhere around 2,500, 2,600 permits a year from that end. If you look at a normal, quote-unquote, normal construction season, you're really looking at roughly an 8-month window because we are in the Northeast. Winter months will impact any excavation that is out there from that end. So if you kind of narrow that down, normally it's a Monday through Friday work week for us. Depending on the area that we're in, that start time is probably later in the morning and finishes early in the afternoon. So it might be a 9 to a 3, versus in some of the other areas, we might be able to do a 7 to 4 or 7 to 5. There are some areas where Eddie in transportation might indicate that because of that location, the weekend work is preferred. It could be
bus lanes, it could be along that way, so we would get pushed to a weekend type setting from that end. From the underground infrastructure design, and I'm glad that Mr. Sullivan had brought it up, it is in that kind of hierarchy. From the bottom is usually where the sewer is, water mains. We're relatively right next to that coming up, as Eileen has pointed out. Above us is maybe some of the underground electric. You have some cable from that end, right? So you have that type of impact from that end. With us being the second oldest gas company, Baltimore beating us out by the first, it is a lot of cast iron pipe. There is a law in place, and Eileen had mentioned the word encroachment. There is a law in place that we must, if our cast iron pipe is impacted, or if there's some type of impact to the soil that's on the ground, we would have to replace that pipe. In terms of the communication, I'll keep on coming back to communication. Some of the efforts that we do with water and sewer, even though it could be a good pipe, if they come close again, we have to replace it. Our conversations might be where they change it a little bit, so we don't have to do it from that end. But again, we will not leave anything unsafe on the ground from that end. So just in terms of where we get into it, there's a lot of devil in the details where, where it looks. That cast iron pipe, you're probably coming in 12-foot sections, and they combine it right there. So every 12 feet, there's a joint that connects the pipe. We usually get questions. It seems like you're out here just digging. You're digging in the same spot. But if you really look from a perception standpoint, that excavation could be 5 feet wide to do that one joint where the weakness could be. That next joint down could also be impacted. So it looks like we're in the same area, but again, we're not from that end. So I think some of that might be helpful when, when we go out in the field. Within our infrastructure, it's mainly cast iron. We try to, right now we're on pace to replace somewhere around 13 miles a year, 13 or 14 miles a year of cast iron pipe, which we call agent infrastructure, to remove that. We have our own plans where we have, and as Water and Sewer mentioned, we share each other from that end, because usually we're in the same area. From that street design, the sewer's probably in the middle, water's offset. We're usually in the gutter line, for lack of a better word, on that side, from there. So that's, and then we'll get into parking as well, because that's usually where the big impact in that. And in terms of the workforce that we have, internally, we, out of the Boston area, which will be our Dorchester yard, our West Roxbury yard, and we also work out of a different union in the Malden area, which covers the East Boston, Charlestown. We have right around 36 crews that are working. That's 2- and 3-person crews from that. And we do work in a 24-hour period, so majority, of course, probably during the day, that shift, 7 to 3, 7 to 4, around that. We do have an afternoon shift, 4 to midnight, and we do have an overnight shift as well. That runs through Monday through Friday. We also have weekend coverage, and those shifts rotate, so we do have activity folks in the field 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We really don't have that type of luxury to take any day off from that end. In terms of the work that we look within that construction field, we're roughly right around 32 to 36 contracting crews, where they will do some of the larger jobs from that end, working in terms of pipe that is not gassed. Anytime that we have to, what we call liven that gas or introduce a new main with gas, the union crews must do that. So that might be where you see different crews coming in, but that is how we're operating from now in. In terms of the work zone itself, granted, maybe years back, we could be taking a lot, but through working with the Public Works and from that end, we try to coordinate where we are. But again, we need a safe work zone to do it. Every work zone that we have does have police details, and the details, as Eddie mentioned, is part of the traffic management plan. They will make that decision in terms of what's closed, what's not. But it's also not only for the vehicular traffic safety or pedestrian, it's also for our workforce. Unfortunately, we've seen a number of instances where cars just barrel right through. And it's tough when you're in a hole and all of a sudden this car's flying right at you. From that scope, our infrastructure normally isn't as deep as what John and Eileen have. We're not down to 30 feet from that end. We're roughly somewhere around the 3 feet, 36 inches normally is where we are. Although being the very old city, we do drop down some areas where it's much deeper. From a safety OSHA perspective, anything that's 5 feet in that excavation must have shoring. And then you may actually see, and which is a job I'd love to take you on, you may actually see where our main could be down 9 feet, 10 feet, especially on High Park Ave coming up. The road kind of runs up a little bit. Our pipe doesn't go with the flow, it's under. In order to do that safely, to put individuals in that hole, we'll have to shore it. We do have metal boxes that are, in some cases, we can utilize that if it's like a 5-6 foot. Once you start going down deeper, we actually use wood shoring, and that will take time. So wood shoring, if you were to ride by a hole, you would actually see timbers 4x4 down into the ground to allow our workers a safe area to work in. Once that work is done, we would remove the timbers and then we start doing the backfill from that end. But that's some of the other areas where when you're looking, it could be delayed only because that's what we're going for. Within the city itself, logistically, we're dealing with every neighborhood except High Park. High Park is not our gas area, it is Eversource gas. But if you go from a north end, narrow street one way, right, to maybe Cummins Highway in Rossi, you go to Center Street in West Roxbury or JP from that end, Blue Hill Ave, going through that. That context of that location of street and the excavation, again, that's part of what we have to do from a safety standpoint. Anytime that road closure is going on from that end, that is a coordination not only with the crew that's on scene, but with the police detail. If we know beforehand where we're going, that's a conversation with Mr. Hesford, because not only is it informing the abutters, commercial, residential, garbage, we've seen where it's people having medicine delivered, from that end, whether it's the mail, but it's also critical that we inform the fire department of any type of road closure so they're well aware of what's going on. And again, that's another partner that we work with from that end. Every year we have a training with them to review some of that activity. As I mentioned, we are regulated. The other item that I think John had mentioned, and I think you would raise maybe in terms of the scope of the permit, the time frame where it is. If it's an emergency, we work rain or shine, snow, whatever it is. If it's a scheduled type job, anytime there's heavy rain coming in, we will not work in that hole. You just have to understand that. Now you have an opening in a street and it's raining, it's going to fill up. That soil in there will start diminishing from that end, so that will cause more of an impact from the paving aspect of it. So that's another thing that's going on. We do have other options that we look at. Some of the larger diameter cast iron pipe, as John Sullivan had mentioned, some of the lining, we do also perform that from a lining perspective where we could do several hundred feet from 2 openings instead of digging every 12 feet from that end. So we do actually perform that type of work. From the other work that we have to look at is from a gas main replacement with existing customers. We don't do that during the winter from that end. But when we do that, we also have to run new service laterals. So if you picture a right side on the odd side of the street, our pipe could be there. The laterals servicing the customers on the even side or the far left has to be replaced. So we will be going across the street, from that end. So that activity will also encompass some of the time frame from where it is on that. From the job information, getting that out to the public, as Peter mentioned, I'll let Peter go on a little bit more in terms of the abutter notices. And If you're not getting them, just please let us know, but everyone should be getting them. We try to send them out 2 weeks in advance from that end. That letter will give a scope within the time frame of what we're looking to do. We actually include in that frequently asked questions and answers that could be on it. And we do include a link from a YouTube as to what to expect during the day that we're working on it from that end. That type of work is always normally business hours going through that. Again, any work that we're doing after hours, evening, overnight, weekends from that, unless specified from a permitting perspective, it is an emergency. And we don't take those lightly. And unfortunately, we may have to investigate a little bit longer than people had thought, but we have to dig that type of thing. During the winter months, I will say, and this year, knock on wood, I mean, from the winter snow and all that, frost wasn't bad. But we have seen areas where the frost line itself starts dropping, and not 36-inch right around that way in terms of where it is. That frost could even drop lower to that, so the frost could encase everything around it. In terms of that investigation, if there's a gas leak there, that will add more time in terms of the investigation from that end. It also will slow down the excavation, because once you start digging and that bucket is going in, if it's all fully encased in the frost, if you pull something wrong, it could impact that whole line itself. Anytime that we're out there responding to a gas leak, when that repair is completed, that crew, that qualified crew that is out there, he or she, the crew leader that's running that job, will do a full evaluation of the pipe that's in the ground. And as I mentioned, we're replacing 13 to 14 miles, but that work may not be on it. That person would identify if there's a concern on that, which brings us back to the coal box, right? It brings it back to our conversations from that end. As you heard John and Eileen mention, a lot of their work going on will impact us and vice versa. We do try to get in beforehand if we can. If not, we try to follow as quickly as you can from that one. From a city-wide aspect of it, and unbelievable job in terms of paving streets from that end, we try to get out ahead of that as much as we can. There's a great program going on from that. We just met the other day in terms of somewhat of the sidewalk intersections where they're putting ramps from that. And so again, that's getting everyone in play. From the coal box itself, back when it started, and my area covers half the state on the gas side, I have been in numerous meetings elsewhere, and I know that the coal box system was talked about in other areas as what people should do in terms of the communication. I know it may not sound like we communicate a lot, but we are in touch with, whether it's Mike Roll, John, Eddie, Neighborhood Services, 311, on the 311, Peter, myself, Victor Santana who's coming in and doing it. We're all on the 311. We get emails right away. Whenever it comes in, we respond right away. We send it to the field. But that communication and collaboration is what we're looking at. And if we see an area where our pipe may not be good and we want to do something right away, we will bring that to John, Public Works, or Boston Water and Sewer, Eversource, and say we need to pull that up. Or vice versa, if they're looking at a road that they want to do and it's not within our 3-year plan, 3 to 5 year plan, then we will try to pull that forward in order to get that go. So there is a collaboration and coordination on that. I'll stop from that. I'll let Peter just mention real quick on the abutter thing, and then I'm sure you have some questions.
Right. On all of our planned work, as Joe referenced, is 2-week notice with what we call an abutter letter. That letter gives the scope of work, our expected time frame. It's mailed to both the owner of record and then any resident of record, and that is both through our gas customers and several other resident notification systems that we use to ensure that people get those letters. That at the top of that letter, linguistically, there are warnings, if you will, to don't discard this and please have it translated or please contact us for more information. So there are, I think there are 6 in the header now. Similarly, if it's a project along a major thoroughfare business area or one of the neighborhood groups IDs it, I will walk it and flyer. I've done that with Patricia Tully. I've done that via Millie Rooney's group in the past and others. I don't have anything in East Boston, Councilor Coletta, so I haven't worked with any of them, but and it'd be a interaction with the owner, business owner, manager of record, providing my information, indicating to them the time frame that we expect to be in front of their business to impede parking and such. As Joe mentioned, we work in a linear fashion to install that pipe. However, once that main is installed, we have to come back and do a service, any service tie-overs, which requires us to come back to point A, if you will. So it does sometimes appear to the uninitiated that we are digging an area twice or even 3 times. Joe had referenced we're DPU regulated, so we have to do verification holes at the outset of a project as well to get a defined corridor for where we're going to put our main. So there potentially could be 3, if not 4, excavations in front of, say, 72 Oak Street on one main project that could take a couple of months. In concert with that, we're required to post 48 hours in advance on no parking and such. What we like to do, or what I like to do with the especially a main replacement where we're working linearly, is to notify folks that you can't park in, say, a 300-foot safety zone as we go down that block. And they become aware of where we're going to be in the next couple of days going forward. So if it's the odd side of the street, no parking on that side. If it does happen to be a road closed, no parking within block of that area, and then we'll come back when we do our services and repost. Councilor Bach did reference one particular project on the Hill where what we did was to try to impact that boing to try to come back and do one block at a time. Install the main, gas it in, come back, do the services. It doesn't always work as expeditiously as we'd like, but sometimes it does minimize impact. So we do realize that we're a visitor to the neighborhood, and we try to be a good steward of that neighborhood while trying to get our work done safely and as quickly as possible.
We can continue going on, but
No, I think we should probably go to council questions now, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Thanks so much, and we'll start again with the co-sponsors. So Councilor Coletta.
Thank you both. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Peter. Peter and I actually know each other from many years back, so I'm happy to see you, and thank you so much again for being here. You did mention that there's scheduled work, there's mandated work, and then there's emergency work. For the purposes of this conversation, right, we're talking about the coordination of permitting and making sure that things that can be planned out are planned out, and that the ultimate result is that residents can move about freely in their district, or they know, or they can plan ahead. So for the scheduled work, well, I guess what is the difference between scheduled and mandated work? We can start there.
It kind of falls in the same, but some of our maintenance work will be smaller excavations if needed. It could be the gate box cover could be high. It could be because of and again, when I mentioned the makeup of the pipe, cast iron, there's protective steel and steel. We need to have corrosion on that. We have to check that on a yearly basis as well from that. So that's kind of the smaller mandated maintenance work. The scheduled work could be a new service. The scheduled work could be some of our investigation inside requires us to replace a service. It could be that, again, that crew leader who found a bad bad piece of pipe, we need to do it, we need to replace it. So that type of a schedule per se, that's where we're looking for the scheduled work from that end. What we also try to do is John and Water and Sewer look at what they're doing in the future. We also are looking at what we're doing in the future, and then trying to coordinate that with what the city's doing in the future, and then some of the other utilities in the area. We try to bring that in and see who's playing, who should be there first, how we're going to go from that. The other aspect, there is a steam company as well downtown. Any pipe that goes within that steam must be steel. We can't put plastic in it because of the heat itself. So that scheduled work is that type of communication, and that Colbuck's program is where it's going. And again, what they call red line streets, or where the major thoroughfares, it's how do you perform that work while minimizing the impact, right? If we go back, as I said, 36 years, when you go back, you always had a commercial area with no residential. So that work could be done after hours. Now that commercial is now with residential above. So, you know, it's that type of a change that we're looking at. So that scheduled work is where we're trying to do that collaboration on it.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, I just have one question if I can interrupt, just to that point. What is Colbuck's the vehicle in which you're having these conversations or communications? Is that where you see everything?
No, so Colbuck's is part of that. I think Colbuck's helps and aids in terms of what you're looking at and planning, but the conversation on the larger scope projects is at least what I've found in the last several years that we've been doing this, is that type of conversation with city, public works, what roads are you paving? You know, John, what are you doing from that Eversource? You put in a new vault on the ground, you know, where it is from that. Even some of the T over the above rail, you know, in terms of where it is, because we're in that Brighton going down by that way, you know, how are we working that? That type of a coordinated effort is better done in person, and that's what we do from like a starting of the construction season where we are now. Running right up to where November is usually where the construction season ends, and then we go into what they call a winter moratorium. And that winter moratorium is we go in on a weekly basis every week with Public Works, and we review what we're doing or what we'd like to do to continue on by also looking at what the weather's coming in. Where we can work, because during the winter you don't want to put plates in there. How can we minimize that type of thing? And again, with the snow removal and the frost. So long-winded answer to that. Schedule, mandated, and emergencies is what it's called.
Yeah, it's different, and that's what I see. And thank you for that. So how many years? And we got a very specific answer from John
John Sullivan
from Boston Water and Sewer. Okay,
yeah.
I was hoping I didn't say the wrong name. There was very specific years out that they are planning.
Yes.
So do you have that sort of timeline as well too? Like how many years are you planning out? And then given the close proximity of assets underground to Boston Water and Sewer, is your plan contingent on what they're doing?
As I mentioned, regulated, so, you know, again, rate base area. We do plan out, and I will be honest in terms of every 5-year plan is a great plan. A lot happens within year 1 and 2 that might impact that 3rd and 4th year. But we have that set aside, right? So as I mentioned, we replaced roughly about 13, 14 miles of aging pipe. We're looking to do that as well, if not increase it. So we're looking probably to do 15, 16 construction season of this year, 2023, and then 2024 trying to do again. So we have that in play, but that type of sharing will pull either our work will pull their work up, or their work might pull up what we're planning in 2026 to bring it back. So we do have a 3 to 5 year plan. Very comfortable with 3 years, 2 to 3. Again, a lot of things change, but we will be pulling stuff from that in.
Great. And do you know, so you have to go through the Colbuck system, you have to go through Ed Harrisford to get permits to shut down the street. Do you know of any instances where National Grid has just closed down a street without permits?
We would not without a permit?
Yeah.
No. Even on so when we, and I think Ed Harrisford started alluding to a little in terms of the app and notification, on an emergency response, right? So someone calls a gas leak in, I'm in a service tech, I go out, I investigate, I say, yep, we need to dig right away, the crew would come out. Once that goes, our dispatch, that is also 24/7, will send that notification to that app. Okay. And everyone knows from an emergency standpoint. That police deal will show up, make a determination, because again, you don't have the luxury of creating a traffic management plan when it's an emergency.
Right.
So that traffic management plan really falls under the police detail from that in coordination with us. If a closure were to go, we would obviously inform Eddie from transportation because it just impacts a lot more. And then if you're looking at that during the daytime, it's logistics. I know you had mentioned in terms of the MBTA, some of that, you can see where those bus line stops are, right? So you know where it is. That type of back and forth with them as well, trying not to impact that morning commute, the afternoon commute, people that are using the MBTA for travel.
What does the notice or notification system look like for emergencies?
What does it look like?
Yeah, so what do you do if it happens on Trenton Street on a certain block?
Yep.
Who is made aware, how?
So if we had and there are third parties that do impact us, and that might excavate and dig it up. So again, we might know where that is. You can see it in the hole, you can see a break. If it's more of a gas odor that we're checking and we have to work, we use the app to do it, but until you start excavating and see what's going on, you really don't know what the scope is on it. But that communication would go to everyone that is on that app. And that's from transportation, public works, all the way through. We pull an emergency permit that we call in that, so we have an emergency permit number from that end. And what we try to do is respond and work that emergency within 24 hours. If that emergency moves into, okay, now we have to replace a little bit more, we then will turn into an emergency permit over to a public works digging excavation permit. That will happen that day. That will be a conversation from that.
Okay. And you all do have really great texting notifications. I get them quite a bit whenever there's a storm or anything like that. So that's great. If there's anything that could be utilized for that, for emergencies.
What we try to do also with Rockwood 311, if there's any major impact, we will actually call 311 as well and say, we had an issue in Moss Hill over in JP. It was a major impact, snow, so we actually called them, put out that. We were almost at the point of doing reverse 911 within that area as well, in terms of what to expect. We were all out there talking to every neighbors because it's cold, right? If there's no gas, no heat, it's cold, we're trying to get that going. And again, that type of, just to use an example, we actually called because the plows couldn't get up. We actually worked with Public Works in terms of the sanding and going from that end.
I see the gavel from the chair. This might be the last gavel that I'll get from her.
You know what?
So I'm going to take this moment in.
I'm afraid. I don't want the last gavel to hurt me, all right? You're yielding that.
Can I just make one more request?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Just one more request.
It's your hearing. I'm feeling indulgent. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. No, it's just a request. I mean, the emergencies, I know it's a sensitive issue just when it comes to gas leaks and stuff like that. Can we have information and data of the amount of gas leaks that have happened across the city of Boston? Like, do you have that living somewhere?
For emergencies that we did?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea, last year, which is 2022, and I have to apologize because that year it doesn't run January to December, right? We run halfway point, don't ask me why, but that's how we do it. But for 2022, we had about 576 grade 1 emergency leaks that came in that we had to respond to, pulled in emergency. Now, those emergencies could be just an odor, the piping, that's why we're trying to replace the agent pipe. It could be a third party impacted that line that resulted in that from that end. So that's where we are. And we're right around, even in 2021, we had about 511.
Okay.
So,
is that an increase over time or average?
It changes with increase of construction in the field. It changes with the weather as well during the winter months from that end. So it's right around there. I wouldn't say it's a major increase, from that end. And just to add in some of the other stuff that we're trying to coordinate, especially with the outside dining, we're trying to do a lot of that work before they started doing. So
happy you brought that up.
Yeah, so
I'm just kidding. I won't do another question, but
yeah, no.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Coletta. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Joe and Peter for the important testimony you're providing. Just want to follow up on maybe a question from Councilor Coletta. As it relates to emergency work that National Grid would do, tell me the procedure for doing the work, but tell me the procedure as it relates to how is Boston Police notified? How is Boston Transportation notified? What do they need to do to make sure your workers are safe at the job site during emergency work?
Sure thing. So again, quickly, call comes in, investigation, I'm a tech, I say, yes, we need that. We have an emergency that we have to dig right away. We can't, if there's a gas order, we could probably schedule it to do a replacement, but if we have to work it right away, that calls into our dispatch center, which is staffed, it's in Northborough. That dispatch center will then notify a supervisor and a crew. If it's off hours, if we have off hours crew, we'll pull it in. We try to get the closest crew without leaving another emergency, so we pull that in. Within that, we also, depending where it is, and I think Ed mentioned it, that the Boston Police have a detail office that we call into that to request, this is where it is, this is what's needed. If that emergency expands into a greater scope and we need to get in some homes, we would actually ask for further police in with any type of a locksmith from that end if we have to. Again, our effort, our number one is public safety, no matter what, and we need to do that. A lot of the gas meters are inside, so we need to get into where that is. From the Public Works Department, we actually get I hate to say, but a book in terms of certain emergency permits that we are allowed to use, because it could be 1 in the morning, we couldn't get into maybe Kathy's office to get a permit. So we use that emergency permit that has a number linked to the address that we're at. And then that automatically, again, goes through that app that we call, and that app will go into both Eddie, John, everyone else that's on that chain within that, so they know that there is an emergency, say at Congress Street, right from that end, and we'll go from that. Conversely, I think there was the water main break the other day. Our coordination with water and sewer is any type of issue with that, their office dispatch calls us, because we want to go out there from that end. When we do our training with police and fire and public works, and we have ISD from that end on a yearly basis, we revisit that water main break scenario, we revisit what needs to be done, and even with fire alarm, we have that conversation with them. If they see it, they call us. If we see it, that type of notification.
Okay. Oh, so if water and sewer has an emergency, a major emergency especially, you guys would also respond?
Yes. Yep. No, we want to respond.
Okay.
Because we want to make sure and clear that there's no impact. The last thing is, again, the aging infrastructure, and as John outlined, the scope of where we are underground, within close proximity of that, we don't want water to get in the gas pipe. If water or moisture is in that gas pipe, again, we're right around that frost level during the winter, it could impact the flow, which creates a different emergency in terms of pressure. So that type of coordination is there.
How close are the water pipes to the gas pipes underground?
Depending on the area in question, there could be a lot of, say, granite or from that end, if you're near the quarries from that side of West Roxbury, so there's not a lot of room, but we try not to share the same trench from that end.
Okay.
The sewer lateral itself usually is much deeper. From that end, water's a little bit up higher, but they may have to go around some of the underground electric infrastructure, even MBTA areas when you're around some of the, even right outside with the green line and red line from that end. So you don't have a lot of room between that ceiling height of the tunnel and the street. So, within that area, probably closer, but when some of the other areas, we try to stay away from that.
Okay. And my final question, tell me about National Grid's, what do you do during construction as it relates to pest control during the construction phase and immediately after it? I know, Joe, you were listening to my comments about pest control, rats and mice and all of that with the previous panel, but those public health issues, as you know, are critical. But just tell me what you guys do on pest control related issues.
It's similar, and again, where our trenches, like the 3 feet, we're usually narrow. We're running from that in, so we're not within that depth of the scope from where it raises. But we do work with ISD as well. One of the areas where we look at, especially college move-in days around that area, you know, with other debris that's out there, we try to coordinate with them. If they see an issue from that, we start looking. If you go into some of the back bay with the alleyways where a lot of dumpsters in the back, not a lot of gas mains are running in the back of the alleyway, but there are some alleyways, and again, that's back going to Second Oldest Gas Company from that end, so it's there. Normally, utility rooms are somewhere on the back end of those buildings. So anything along that nature, we will work with ISD from that area and other entities if they're out there.
But do you do the baiting, or do you contract it out, or is that the city?
It doesn't, it really depends on what you see where we are. A lot of our work, apart from the big main work, a lot of our work is really 5x4 holes where it's right there and not traveling that. We're normally right in the street anyways from that end. The good and bad from the oldest gas company, or second oldest, some of the services have a larger diameter pipe. We can actually insert plastic right through it, so there's less excavation from that end. So the normal activity for us really doesn't influence the run, but anytime we see it, both internal, external contracting crews, that's noted, and we deal with ISD from that.
I guess my final question is a question I should know, but have you ever seen when you're doing construction work, and again, I spend a lot of time on pest control issues, but have you ever seen a rat kind of bite through the pipe and
no.
It's caused damage that way?
Yeah, no. And the plastic, again, the plastic that we're doing now has to be, so City of Boston, predominantly low pressure, meaning inches of water column. We do have a 22-pound intermediate system from that in, but that new plastic that we're putting in has to be tested 1.5 times at operating pressure. So we're putting a lot of air in that to test it and make sure it's good, which in terms of biting through from that type of thing, it's very tough to do. I mean, it's from that end, you can't really get through it. When we backfill and compact, sand, then our pipe is on it. We have to do a compaction level on footing every couple of, depending on how deep we are. So every 6 inches we have to compact solid, and that's really what's holding the pipe. So the cavity for running around is very limited, if there at all.
Thank you for your response. Thank you for the important work your team does throughout the city. Madam Chair, I have no further questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. Yeah, just some final questions from me, and then we'll wrap this hearing. I just want to note for the public, I believe right now that we've taken all testimony, so if you're still looking to testify, please make sure to sign up in the corner or shoot Megan an email, meghan.kavanagh@boston.gov, because we're going to be wrapping shortly. But if you watch this after the fact and you want to send us written testimony, you can always do that to ccc.csit@boston.gov. So just a couple of questions from me. Can you walk, so the Feeney Brothers project that's going on both on Charles Street and on Anderson Street, and a number of other places,
yes,
like on Beacon Hill, can you walk me through what that project is?
Sure. So, and I know Peter's been heavily involved, and I'll let him expand a little bit more, but one of the things that Colbucks does, and one of the efforts that the city's also trying to do is how can we get everybody kind of go in there, replace the infrastructure, and then have the final product come out with paved new sidewalks and go. So that area in Beacon Hill, again, we're trying to identify certain areas, and not only Beacon Hill, it's also the north and all the way through, in terms of replacing the aging infrastructure, which is what we want to do, so we're out of there so the city can keep going on. From that type of area on Beacon Hill, you're looking at one-way streets as well, right from that end. How do you carefully navigate to do that work, to try to do it quickly but safely, without impeding everything else that's going on? And that's vehicular and pedestrian traffic from that end. Also, when you're putting in the services, and I know you're aware in terms of the width of the street, right, from that end, how do you coordinate going from lateral going over? So that might involve some of the closing, because you have to go the whole span of that roadway to go over. Now you're cutting in, you cannot put meters outside, especially in Beacon Hill, from that end, because there's nowhere to put it from that end. So you still have to go inside the home or dwelling. Typically, it's all brick sidewalks. You have to systematically pull it out because it has to be Boston brick. They usually hand number where they go from that end to put it back in place to make sure everything's going back from that end. But in terms of the scope of the project, that's what we were doing. As I mentioned, we're replacing that 14 miles. So it's tough to say, all right, we want to do all of Beacon Hill, because you can't, right? You can only do certain amount of streets that you can, again, from the vehicular traffic, State House activity, Suffolk Law, Suffolk at University from that end. So that is how we look at certain areas, not to put multiple crews in there, but we are looking to do streets. And to do it from that end, you want to link it all together. Because if you look at a gas main, the flow is going in one way or the other, but it's like a tree, the trunk, right? You're running that, and that gas is flowing out of the trunk into the branches, which is this mains going down and then into the services. So we try to identify that area, replace, and then connect. Also on Beacon Hill, you have gas lamps. So you have to connect that, because that's connected directly to the gas main. So it's trying to get all that from that end. Peter, did I miss anything?
So for Anderson Street per se, we're running all the way down the hill from, is that Pinckney coming down up the top? I think it's Pinckney all the way to Cambridge Street. So we started that last year. And as I said, this project, we decided to try to do individual blocks instead of running all of the main down to Cambridge Street and then coming back up to the top and replacing each individual service. So the scope of the work would basically entail the contract. We'd send out our abutter letters. We'd get, well, let me even backtrack further for the sake of this discussion. We'd have reserve the spot in Cobucks. We'd have the appropriate conversations with the city officials as well as Beacon Hill Civic. Would then be given a permit to proceed. At that time, the abutter letters would be sent out to any of the folks on the route. And then our contractor, in this case Feeney Brothers, would mobilize from the top at Pinckney Street and work their way down, replacing the gas main first. And then on this project, they'd do a block or 2 blocks, do their safety checks and reintroduce gas into that new portion of main, and then go back and replace the service laterals off of that new main. So they need to tie over the existing service to the new gas main.
And can you also tell me about the Charles Street project?
So the Charles Street project would be similar, but that we have 2 mains on Charles Street that we're replacing. So there's an odd side and an even side on that. And then similarly, we went out into the circle, Charles Circle, tied in there, but that also runs to the road coming around. I apologize. If
Do
you're
Charles
coming
Circle to
into Charles Circle, the hotel's on your right.
yeah.
The road, the introductory road
Yep.
there. I apologize, I don't know the name of
Oh,
it.
you're making me blank on it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's not,
And-
it's not, it doesn't wrap, it's not fruit wrapping around. Yeah, anyways, go on. I know what you're talking about.
So basically, we did all the even side of Charles Street first, but then that loops around and comes back to the odd side of the street as well. So we had to do both sides of the street, tie in each side street that goes up the hill or comes down the hill on both sides, and then do individual services as well as the proper notifications on the brick removal and service verifications and such. And that all came after the previous discussion of getting the permits and the and such.
So do you think you guys could, and sorry, I realize that I don't actually have contacts for you both, so I might grab those after the meeting, but like, could you sit with sort of the District 8 office and Beacon Hill Civic and walk us through the updated timeline? Because I think part of the frustration is, and I appreciate the things it sounds like you're doing so that you don't have to go back 3 times and stuff, but I think it's I think people know that it's sort of a long time trajectory, but not clear on exactly how long and where. And the other thing is, I'll just say, I mean, John Vazella isn't here anymore, but you know, we're quite behind on repaving on Beacon Hill, in part, as you know, probably because of the ramps back and forth like 5 years ago. And what that means is that, or I guess 8 years ago now, what it means is that the streets on the hill are already like a number of years behind schedule because of the pause related to that legal dispute. And now, like, I asked about a bunch of streets for repaving this spring, and just a huge number of them are implicated by your work and are therefore not eligible for resurfacing. So from my perspective as a counselor, it would be like much better to get whole streets done so that we can repave them. It's my own time. So that we can repave them instead of like this drips and drabs thing where I can't repave any of the streets. I mean, a few of them are like a country road and asphalt at this point. I mean, you know, it's kind of crazy on Garden Street, for instance.
We would love to do so. Again, I think we're trying to get there, but we're trying to get in and replace, so everything will be good. And as you see, our work is a little bit more complicated than, say, electric running lines or from that end. It is that ability to put new pipe in and then reconnect so that the existing customer is not without gas service for a long period of time. We try to keep it within a 3 to 4 hours. So if there's a way that we can work with you in terms of pushing that way, I have no issue. John and I talk probably every day. I have no issue going to John and looking internally as well and saying, we need to go back and do it that way. And then let's look at that restoration sidewalk from that end. How can we improve or quicken that, right? So that we don't leave a safety hazard from that end.
Yeah. Yeah, so it would be great for us to circle briefly before I jump to the next job, but also then to continue to work with the office, because my office is going to be continuing, and I know this is enough of a neighborhood issue that my successor counselor is going to be focused on it as well, because it's just, yeah, like I said, it would be, and look, a job that's big is big. I think it's just like us understanding like how big is it, and then within those parameters, how can we focus things? And I guess my one other question for you guys is just sort of from, obviously there's lots of folks in my district concerned about the gas leaks problem in general, and I'm kind of curious whether, like, what your guys' own assessment in terms of, like, is the number of gas leaks proliferating because of the old infrastructure, or are you starting to get a handle on it in terms of, like, the pace of repairs? Like, you know, how should we understand National Grid's position on where it is on gas leaks?
Yes, so, and again, I get 36, I started in the field, I've been doing corporate affairs within this area, 3 administrations. I've seen when the numbers were high. In my opinion, and what I've seen, especially going through winters, and I kind of judge on the winters, the frost, the heavy, do we get a lot of main breaks? Is the inferior of the pipe getting worse? I would argue it's getting better, right? We're replacing a lot of that cast iron. And I alluded to it at the beginning, every 12 feet there's a joint. not to go on too much, but that joint is held together by jute that's inside. That kind of dries out. That's where you're getting a lot of these leaks. So we are trying to replace versus going out and looking at a small leak. Now, if we have to do a gas leak, there's no issue. We're doing, as I mentioned, I think we had 5 something on the emergencies. I think we did 175, just the smaller grade 3s around the area. So we are seeing improvement. I know people don't look at it that way, but we are. And the plastic that we're putting in now, and if you take the envision of that plastic pipe, you now have not 12 feet intervals, but it's a much longer space that you can install and drop in, say 100 feet, 200 feet, what it is. That plastic, it does have the ability to move within the frost area as well, because again, as I mentioned, we're in the dirt. That plastic can move. Where that cast iron pipe, that impact is every 12 feet. If this side moves, it kind of loosens that, that's where you get the leak. So we're trying to go after, and we're using it on a couple of different programs. It's the main replacement that we're looking at. And then we have some high emitters, if you're familiar with, from that end, where we look at that as well and go after those from that end. So I know people argue with me, but I from what I see now, I see it improving from that end.
And how much would it simplify the replacement work in a place like Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Bay Village, as the city moves to electrification of the gas lamps? So such that when you're replacing things, you don't have to also replace the direct connect to the gas lamp.
During the conversation, actually within some of that work, we put it out there and say, please tell us before, right? Because again, that service, it's not like it's running to your house with a meter. That service of the gas lamp is coming right from the main, right into the base of the lamp. What we asked at the beginning was, if you are looking for us to remove the lights, just tell us while we're doing the work, right, from that end. You also have to look and say, okay, if you're removing the lighting gas lamp, your replacement is what, right? So if you're running electric, if you're running electric to get in there, there's no poles really in the back of Beacon Hill, so you're running underground. So you need to run that electrical infrastructure underground to the lamp. So again, that's that, we kind of back to your meeting here is the coordination, communication. Just let us know from that end. At that point, they said, no, go with the lights. We haven't made that decision. If we were asked to, at whatever date, to isolate that lamp, say for an example, we would have to do it because, again, we're regulated. We would have to cut it at that gas main. You do not want to leave a stub of a piece of pipe, small, with gas up to that sidewalk. Because somebody else coming around that might do a curb, that might do some other work and hits it, that's where it is from that end. So that's why we asked right at the beginning, when we work with street lighting as well from the city of Boston, and it's not only the street lights, there are also fire lamps that we work with the Boston Fire. There's 2 right around that area, right by State House and going down up that. So when we do the gas main replacements, and it's really Beacon Hill, you have some in Charlestown, you have some going on the Back Bay, and then you have some right by on the other side of Christopher Columbus Park going out that way. So any work that we're doing out that's part of that conversation is we're here, just tell us, and we'll interrupt it, but it's that coordination, form it, and how do you do the electrical?
And I think in Back Bay, we've had a long-running issue with the first block of Marlborough Street, like something about you guys not being able to, we've got like some lamps that have been out for a long time there.
So the lamps itself, Boston.
No, but it's related to a National Grid issue, because several times we've tried to get it fixed at the city side.
If you have them,
let's follow up on that. Yeah. And then what about I think we've got 3 of the fire alarm poles right now in Beacon Hill that are missing their top completely.
Yes, so the structure itself is the responsibility of the party that owns that structure.
The fire department. Yeah. But what I heard was that they can't replace the lights up there because it's on you guys. The whole lighting system's completely gone.
Yes,
off the poles.
And believe, when I was in the field, I would have mantles. I would have a ladder, and if I went out there, I would shut the gas off, take the panel down and put mantles up. That work has moved over for the maintenance of the structure itself. Base, pole, light, mantles
Has moved to whom?
is the responsible party that owns that structure.
Okay, so somebody from Boston Fire told me last week that it was you guys who had to replace the lights. So-
Unless they're looking and say we're replacing, but the gas service was not connected.
No, this is where like the whole top, like it just ends in a pole. Like the entire top light structure is missing.
I'd be happy.
Yeah, we need to follow up on this, because
Yeah.
that's what I was told. It was you guys who were causing these to be topless.
I'm not pointing at anyone. I'll take the ownership of it, but
So let's
let me know and
chase
I'll-
that
yeah.
down.
I'll look at that.
I was just with the fire and the marathon coverage, so, you know.
Yeah, I can send you, and I can send you some photos.
Yep.
It says we've got like 3 of them that are just without their tops altogether.
I'll walk out there and visit.
But I do think it does concern me, and this is not on you guys. It's just something that I think we have to get on top of. That I mean, obviously, and you know, things move, right? The reality is, like with the electric, the pilot going in Bay Village.
Yes.
I think that we've found, you know, the big question was for the historic districts, could we find an look-alike to the gas lamps that both in the appearance of the fixture, but also the quality of the light
Yes.
would be close enough to maintain the historic sense. You know, we've got a pilot running in Bay Village right now. I'll just say for me personally, as someone who walks there frequently because my parents still live in the neighborhood, it's great. I think we've kind of hit that mark in terms of indistinguishable. So it does seem like this is something where the city's going to start thinking about doing more of this, but obviously with us cutting up all the streets in the hill and them not having been repaved in ages, we do not want to repave them and then go back in and cut gas at the main in order to make that substitute. So it does seem like this is why I think we probably should all pull together and talk just about your guys' project, how we order it so that we can repave whole streets sooner rather than later. And then also, you know, it might be too late to talk about this on Anderson Street, but are there other, you know, blocks and parts of the plan where if the city's, you know, because you guys may be like, well, and we're going to be here in 18 months, right? And then
The good news, I guess, Counselor, is we're below Revere Street going toward Cambridge Street, so we're right at the tail end of that project. So most of those lamps have services.
And again, there's so much ground to cover. There are 1,100 gas lamps in Beacon Hill that I don't think we need to circle back to stuff that just got, you know, put in anytime soon. But it's more like if there is upcoming work, I think we're going to want to coordinate that, because I do think that the policy on the city side has been shifting.
We'll be happy. Like I said, that's why we looked at it prior to.
Yeah. Great. Okay, those are my questions. I went well over my time, took the chair's prerogative. I'm going to allow Councilor Coletta a final closing statement, and then we're going to gavel this hearing to a close.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now an expert on all streets in District 8. Thank you so much for holding this hearing. It's really hard to get these sort of conversations on the docket in the City Council, just for those who are listening. And thank you both so much for your testimony. Again, super informative. I have a lot of, I still have a lot of questions, but I think that, you know, we can have subsequent conversations about this. I think from the very beginning, my thought was that a GIS mapping tool for coordinating your work, Boston Water and Sewer's work, Eversource was supposed to be here. I was hoping to hear from them, but it is 15 years old. And so how do we best utilize some of our modern tools to continue work that humans have been doing for thousands of years? And of course, as a Latin school grad, I think about the Roman roads and Via Appia, and that's what makes a world-class city. And so if we're not getting our roads right, then what are we doing? So I think that this is really, really important work, and it may seem mundane to a lot of people, but this is exactly why I love being a city councilor. These are things that affect people every single day. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that. And I remembered this during the conversation. I should have mentioned it when Boston Water and Sewer was here, but my grandfather spent 35 years of his career literally digging trenches for a living for Boston Water and Sewer. And so I don't know how or what, but maybe there's just a cosmic pull for me to continue doing this work. And I do see it as very low-hanging fruit for the city to invest in resources and having the political will to just modernize their permitting system. I think that there's a lot that could be done, a lot of good work that could be done for that. It may take a long time. I know that it's easier said than done, but I do look forward to those subsequent conversations. Unfortunately, not under the leadership of Chair Bach, but I promise to take the baton and keep running with it. So thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to working with you.
Again, anytime field trip, however you want to do it. And just to close, as I said, I cover a lot of cities and towns, and they talk about the coal buck system in terms of how that communication happens, right? How the benefit of that. And I'll go back to when my opening comments, you did have an all-star panel here. They do care about the streets. They do care about the city, and we do as well. And that coordination, collaboration is key, and they hold us right to that 11th degree in terms of making sure. So I just didn't want it to be left from that. But always looking to improve. I think the new system probably could work. They probably have a little bit better handle on that, and we're here for whatever the city needs.
Thank you, and I would take you up on that offer for a field trip out to see exactly what's going on so that I can be a better city councilor and advocate effectively for my constituents.
Love to.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you. And thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much. And I just want to give a shout out to Councilor Coletta, because despite the fact that I have chaired at this point hundreds of hearings on the Boston City Council, this is the first time the co-sponsor has ever brought me candy to tide me through the end. So it's a good way to go out here. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I obviously, even though I'm changing roles, the work of the District 8 Councilor continues, and so I will follow up with you for that coordination on the Beacon Hill side. But I also, I also look forward to working with you in the Boston Housing Authority role. Obviously, again, a large landlord with a lot of hookups, even if we're trying to move away from them. But I do really appreciate you. I appreciate a prior panel. We do have representatives of Boston Water and Sewer still here, so they heard about your family history, Councilor Coletta, and they know that they have you as a backup should they need you. But yeah, seriously. I think a lot about the mechanics of city government as this double-sided coin, where a lot of times people in the public see a thing and they're just like, why is the city not doing this obvious thing, right? Like coordinating everybody to get in the hole all at the same time, right? And often, as we learn as counselors, often we are first motivated by that question that we get from our constituents, and then you lift the lid a little bit and you discover, oh, in fact, a whole lot of people are coordinating a whole lot of things, right? And a lot of things in the city, especially a city like this, it is so dense and so historic, are just very complicated. And a lot of really smart and capable and dedicated people are working very hard on them. And so I always feel like it's an interesting thing for us as counselors that our responsibility is both to translate that information back to the public and be like, actually, they are working on it. This is more complicated than it seems. Here's what's going on, et cetera. And then on the flip side, the other side of the coin, it is also our job to always say, hey, we could be doing better. And hey, maybe if the secret is that you're doing all this great coordination, let's make it a little less secret, right? And if we have a plan and if we know what things are, let's figure out how to communicate that to the public. So I always think of us as kind of these translators, where it's both our job to help the public understand everything that's being done on their behalf for public servants, by public servants, and also our role to ask our public servants to help the public understand better, because of course one of our big agendas here is to build people's confidence and faith in government, especially given just how many great folks we have working for city government, and we always want to be finding ways to do that better. So appreciate all of our city department partners and all of our private partners in that endeavor as well. And with that, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.